Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. The God of Ice and Fire at Hogwarts. Chapter 61. After the Christmas vacation began, Lynn started looking for the Mirror of Erised in Hogwarts Castle, but he didn't know the specific location of the abandoned classroom, which took him 3 days. We even found this place after following Harry, who made a huge noise. Unfortunately, as soon as he arrived, he noticed Professor Dumbledore sitting on the table, which forced him to obtain Professor Dumbledore's permission before studying the Mirror of Erised. "Oh," Professor Dumbledore said softly, "but I think you should understand the dangers of this Mirror of Erised." Lynn nodded and said, "This is natural. I am not interested in what the Mirror of Erised reflects, but the Mirror of Erised is an extremely exquisite alchemical product. I want to use it to study the mysteries of alchemy. You should know, Professor, I have become a disciple of Professor Green, and now I am an official alchemist," Lynn said to Professor Dumbledore. As the principal of Hogwarts, Professor Dumbledore naturally could hide very few things that happened in Hogwarts Castle from him. Lynn believed that the other party already knew that he was Professor Green's student, so he stated his intention straight to the point. Professor Dumbledore was not surprised. A faint light flashed behind his half-moon glasses. He nodded slightly and said, "Of course, Hogwarts will never refuse students to learn more knowledge. Except for dangerous knowledge. You can study the Mirror of Erised here, but only for tonight. I will still move it away tomorrow." Lynn had no problem with this, and he also understood what the Mirror of Erised would be used for. At the end of this school year, the Mirror of Erised will become the last hurdle to guard the Philosopher's Stone. Only those who want to find the Philosopher's Stone but do not want to use it can take out the Philosopher's Stone from the Mirror of Erised. Professor Dumbledore showed him a mysterious smile, then stood up straight and left the abandoned classroom. Lynn respectfully watched Professor Dumbledore leave, and then turned his attention to the Mirror of Erised. This Mirror of Erised seems to have the function of reading minds. After it read Lynn's heart, it projected the corresponding picture. Lynn glanced at the picture in his glasses and raised the corners of his mouth slightly, revealing a sneer. Immediately afterwards, Lynn raised his right hand holding the wand, and a faint golden light shot out of the air and merged into the Mirror of Erised in an instant. The next moment, the image in the mirror disappeared, and the entire Mirror of Erised began to emit golden light. Alchemy runes emerged from inside the Mirror of Erised and appeared in front of Lynn. Lynn waved the wand in his hand easily and freely, fiddling with the alchemy circles that appeared in front of him. Soon, he found the goal of his trip. The wand in Lynn's hand gently clicked on an alchemy circle flashing with strange lines, causing it to move towards him, while Lynn carefully looked at every alchemy rune inside the alchemy circle. Is this an alchemical rune that can read people's hearts? This may have the same effect as the curse legilimency. Interesting. Lynn looked at the shining alchemical runes in front of him and murmured in his mouth. Even if they are two completely different power systems, they mostly have methods that can achieve the same goal. For example, ordinary people's firearms and wizards' death spells can both achieve the purpose of killing a person. In the same way, the wizard's legilimency spell and the alchemy rune in front of Lynn's eyes can both achieve the purpose of stealing other people's minds. Wait a minute, this magic mirror seems to not only rely on the alchemy circle to peek into the heart. Suddenly, Lynn's expression changed. He waved his wand and pulled another alchemy circle not far away in front of him. Lynn used the secret technique taught to him by Master Nico Flamel and analyzed the alchemy circle in front of him. Soon, Lynn understood. So, is that the alchemy circle that can steal the soul, and the alchemy circle that can create illusions and make people lose their mind in series, finally create this Mirror of Erised. Lynn raised his wand, and the golden light flew out of the Mirror of Erised and returned to his wand. The alchemical formations that emerged earlier lost the support of the secret method and soon returned to the Mirror of Erised. Looking at the Mirror of Erised in front of her, Lynn was thoughtful. Fortunately, the maker of this Mirror of Erised does not have too much malicious intent. Otherwise, as long as the proportion of the power of each alchemical circle is adjusted, this magic mirror will become a real murder weapon, and it will be able to adjust according to everyone's needs. The experience creates an illusion that is enough to seduce people's minds and make people get lost forever. This time it's really rewarding. Lynn smiled. In the Mirror of Erised, Lynn successfully reproduced the alchemical circle in it. As for the properties of the alchemical runes in it, Lynn planned to name them Legilimency, Illusion, and Lost, respectively. Quote. Just as Lynn was about to leave the abandoned classroom, his steps suddenly stopped. He turned around again and looked at the Mirror of Arised. Wait a minute, if this Mirror of Arised is used to guard the Philosopher's Stone, maybe I can add a little more to it. The corners of Lynn's mouth rose, and he planned to give Voldemort a hard blow. When he was analyzing the alchemical array of the Mirror of Arised, he also discovered a storage alchemical array that could store objects and take them out when needed. The storage function of this alchemy circle is rather special. It can freeze the time of the objects stored in it, and when the objects are stored, the storer can set the conditions for their removal. It's like Professor Dumbledore put the Philosopher's Stone in it, and he set the condition that only those who want to find the Philosopher's Stone without using it can take it out. Lynn stepped forward with a sinister smile. He took out a pineapple-shaped Mk2 grenade from his pocket, pulled out the safety pin and stuffed it into the Mirror of Arised. Set the extraction method so that only those who want to get the magic stone and use it to achieve their own goals can extract this Mk2 grenade from it. Lynn's voice was cold, as if he was delivering a sentence. After completing the storage and retrieval conditions, Lynn left the abandoned classroom with ease. Not long after he left the abandoned classroom, Professor Dumbledore's figure appeared at the door of the classroom again. He came to the Mirror of Arised and planned to move it away. But when he touched the Mirror of Arised, he seemed to notice something, and a strange look appeared on his face. The Christmas break always flies by, and on the day before school started, Hermione was back at Hogwarts Castle. Not long after the holiday started, the Hogwarts Quidditch match was coming again. This time Gryffindor faced Hufflepuff, because the Gryffindor Quidditch team defeated Slater. Lynn, so as long as they can beat Hufflepuff, they will be able to beat Slytherin in the Academy Cup Championship and win the championship. Irina, Hermione and Ron were all cheering on Harry's training. However, Hermione and Ron's attitudes changed immediately after learning that the referee for this match was Professor Snape. From the perspective of Hermione and Ron, it was Professor Snape who cast a spell on Harry in the last game, and this time Professor Snape is the referee and is probably going to attack Harry. I only heard Hermione say to Harry, "Stop participating in the competition." Ron answered, "Just say you are sick." Hermione suggested, "Pretend you broke your leg." Ron suggested, "Really break your leg." The other three people immediately set their sights on Ron, making Harry really break his leg. "Are you the mole?" "I can't do this," Harry said with a very helpless expression. "Our Gryffindor Quidditch team has never had a substitute seeker. If I quit, the Gryffindor Quidditch team might not even be able to participate in the game." "No more." While Hermione and Ron were worried about Harry and Irina was paddling nearby, Neville crashed into the Gryffindor common room. At this time, Neville's legs were stuck together tightly, and it was obvious that a leg-locking spell had been cast on him. If no one had helped, he would have jumped up like a rabbit. "Who did this?" Irina stood up, her face cold. After more than half a school year, Neville had long been her friend, and she naturally couldn't ignore him if he attacked her friend. "What's going on?" Hermione quickly cast a breaking spell on Neville, then led Neville over and asked him to sit down. Neville said with a trembling voice, "It was Malfoy who did it. I met him outside the library. He said that he had been looking for someone to practice that spell." Irina didn't say anything. She picked up Neville and walked out of the common room. "Hey, Irina, what are you doing?" Neville didn't understand. Irina said angrily, "Remember, Neville, I never allow others to bully my friends. Of course, you should never tolerate anyone bullying you. You have to be brave. Come on, I will take you to beat me up." Malfoy. Hearing this, Harry and Ron, who were not far away, immediately followed excitedly. Before Neville could say anything, Harry and Ron supported Neville and followed Irina's pace. Under Neville's guidance, Irina found a proud Malfoy not far outside the library. He seemed to be elated because he had successfully tricked Neville. "Stand stiff and stop dead." Irina raised her wand without hesitation and cast a spell. Malfoy's legs immediately stuck together, and he staggered and almost fell to the ground. "Lowell, you are looking for death." The cursed Malfoy was so angry that he raised his wand and wanted to attack Irina. Expelliarmus. Irina flicked her wand and without giving Malfoy a chance to react, she fired a disarming spell. The red light bombarded Malfoy, sending him flying backwards. The wand in Malfoy's hand flew out and landed in Irina's hand. Hit him, Neville. Irina looked at Neville, pointed at Malfoy who was lying on the ground, and said. Neville was a little timid. I don't dare. Irina patted Neville's shoulder hard. What's so scary, isn't it, Malfoy? Remember, if you just tolerate it, it will only make Malfoy worse. Only by making him understand what pain is, let him avoid you so that you won't be bullied. With that said, Irina pushed Neville forward and in front of Malfoy. Neville raised his huge fist, but he was still a little at a loss and didn't dare to really make a move. Longbottom, how dare you do something to me? Looking at the black fist above his head, Malfoy panicked. Hearing this, Neville immediately shrank his neck and did not dare to take action again. Hit him, Neville. That's right, beat him. But at this moment, Harry and Ron were waving flags and encouraging Neville. After hearing the encouragement from his good friends, Neville finally made up his mind. He closed his eyes and punched Malfoy one after another. Ooh, ooh ho ho, ooh. Malfoy's shrill screams suddenly came out, as if they were voiced by Tom Cat. After an unknown amount of time, Neville carefully returned to his original position, leaving Malfoy lying on the ground with a bruised nose and a swollen face. Malfoy, stay away from Neville from now on, otherwise we will beat you every time we see you. With Irina by his side, Ron pretended to be powerful. After that, everyone took Neville back to the Gryffindor common room. When Goyle and Crabbe, who were hiding far away, saw everyone leaving, they cautiously stepped forward to help Malfoy up. Boss, are you okay? Goyle and Crabbe shook Malfoy. Stop. Malfoy stopped the two of them and said harshly, stop shaking, I will throw up if you shake it any more. Lowell, Longbottom, I must tell my father. Meanwhile, in the Gryffindor common room. Irina, you seem to have become a lot stronger again. I remember you used to only use freezing spells to hit people. Hermione, who had been silent until now, said to Irina. Although the violent beating of Malfoy was to avenge Neville, it was ultimately an act of fighting violence with violence, and Hermione did not support or object to this. After all, this is all for his good friend Neville. Irina chuckled and hugged Hermione. The magic spells are all common. My freezing spell can be cast without a wand. It is natural to cast other spells without any difficulty. In fact, Irina still hid something. Her disarming spell and other offensive spells were able to be cast silently after she learned the wandless casting of the freezing spell. Like Lynn, although she has revealed her trump card for wandless casting of freezing spells, she still plans to keep her ability to cast other spells silently as her trump card. Irina looked at Harry and said, Harry, you can just go on with your Quidditch match. If Professor Snape wants to hurt you, I will hit him with a disarming spell. Harry nodded vigorously, his eyes filled with admiration. In the eyes of Harry and others, Irina has long been their eldest sister. With the elder sister covering her head, she doesn't panic at all when something happens. However, what Harry worried about did not happen. When Harry and others arrived at the Quidditch pitch, they found Professor Dumbledore present, which reassured Harry and others. This Quidditch match went extremely smoothly for Harry. Not long after the game started, Harry caught the golden snitch and won the championship for Gryffindor. The stands were filled with excitement. This was probably the fastest time the golden snitch had been caught since the Quidditch game was founded at Hogwarts. At this moment, Harry jumped off the Nimbus 2000 at a height of 1 foot above the ground. His face was filled with joy. He could not believe that he had won the game in less than 5 minutes. At this moment, Harry felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Professor Dumbledore. Well done, Professor Dumbledore said softly. I'm glad to see you're not thinking about that mirror all day and are living life to the fullest. Harry smiled. With 3 good friends, Irina, Hermione and Ron, he would naturally no longer indulge in illusory things. Harry happily came out of the locker room and returned to his friends, accepting their congratulations. I'm going to put the broom back in the broom shed first. See you later, Harry said to everyone. However, when Harry came to the broom shed to put down his broomstick and looked towards Hogwarts Castle, he suddenly saw a hooded figure quickly walking down the main entrance steps of the castle and heading straight for the Forbidden Forest. The appearance of this figure made Harry immediately alert, and he recognized that the owner of the figure was Snape. Could it be that Snape was going to do something bad? Harry speculated maliciously. Harry quickly jumped on his Nimbus 2000 and followed Snape, intending to follow him quietly and see through the other party's conspiracy. After entering the Forbidden Forest, the dense branches and leaves blocked Harry's sight, but luckily, Snape stopped shortly after entering the Forbidden Forest. Riding on the Nimbus 2000, Harry quietly pushed aside the leaves and looked at the shadow-filled open space below. Quirrell was seen standing not far from Snape, and the two seemed to be confronting each other. No, I don't know why you want to choose to meet here, Severus. Quirrell's stumbling voice came out. Oh, I don't think this should be made public, Snape said, his voice very cold. After all, students are not supposed to know about the Philosopher's Stone. Magic Stone. Harry was startled and listened quickly. Snape asked coldly, have you figured out how to get past Hagrid's monster? Quirrell looked overwhelmed. But, Severus, You don't want me to be your enemy, Quirrell, Snape said, taking a step closer to him. Quirrell's voice still stuttered. I don't know, you. Snape interrupted Quirrell directly. You know exactly what I mean. Hey, Quirrell, your secret little trick. I'm waiting. But, I don't, no. Quirrell seemed to have some concerns. Very well, Snape interrupted him again. It won't be long before you have time to think it over and decide who you are loyal to. We will talk again. Snape threw his cloak over his head and strode out of the clearing. Seeing this, in order to prevent himself from being discovered, Harry quietly left on his broomstick, leaving Quirrell standing there alone, like a clay sculpture. Tisk, ha! But just after Harry left, Quirrell let out a soft tisk, and he suddenly glanced in the direction Harry left, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised, revealing a smile. Harry, where have you been? In Hogwarts Castle, Hermione looked at Harry, who had just returned, and asked. Harry's eyes were very serious. He took Ron and Hermione's hands. Don't worry about that, let's find an empty room, I have something to tell you. Irina asked. About Professor Snape, isn't it? Harry froze for a moment. He looked at Irina in surprise, then nodded honestly, yes. Harry took the three of them to an empty room and told them what he had seen and heard. So, our analysis is correct. The thing guarded by the three-headed dog is the Philosopher's Stone, and Snape wants to get the Philosopher's Stone. In addition, Snape mentioned Quirrell's secret little trick. Could it be that, say, besides Lu Wei, Quirrell is also one of the guardians of the Sorcerer's Stone, and there are other organs under the trapdoor guarding the stone? Hermione analyzed calmly. Irina said, perhaps many professors at Hogwarts were involved in arranging the mechanisms to protect the magic stone. If I guessed correctly, the professors responsible for arranging these mechanisms are the professors of our required courses, including the herbal medicine class. Professor Sprout, Professor Flitwick from the Charms class, Professor McGonagall from the Transfiguration class, Professor Quirrell from the Defense Against the Dark Arts class, and Professor Snape from the Potions class. Perhaps Professor Dumbledore is also involved. I have already spoiled the level to you, please do your best and stop making up for it. Irina looked nervously at the three of them, for fear that they would say something shocking. What, you said that Snape also participated in guarding the Philosopher's Stone? Harry looked at Irina in disbelief. Irina nodded and analyzed. Yes, otherwise how would Snape get the news about the Philosopher's Stone? Besides, it is often easiest to keep it secret. The three nodded repeatedly. Irina's analysis convinced them. Hermione said solemnly, then we have to pay even more attention. After all, Snape participated in setting up the institutions, and I am afraid he also has a certain understanding of the institutions of several other professors. Harry and Ron also participated in the discussion, and they put forward their own opinions on how to prevent Snape from stealing the Philosopher's Stone. While the three of them were having a heated discussion, Irina raised her hand weakly. By the way, have you considered a possibility? What's the possibility? The three of them looked at Irina. Irina said, maybe Quirrell also wants to get the Philosopher's Stone. Otherwise, why didn't Quirrell report this matter to Professor Dumbledore, but was willing to go to the Forbidden Forest alone to meet Snape? Unless they are already competitors, otherwise it wouldn't make sense. Since Snape's scapegoat can no longer be washed away, let her drag Quirrell into the water too. Anyway, Harry and the others have already planned to take action. By including Quirrell among the targets that need to be guarded against, her goal will be achieved. As for monitoring Snape, just let them go, it will just kill their excess energy. Irina nodded with satisfaction. So, Harry, Ron, and Hermione began to guard against Professor Snape and Quirrell. As for Irina, she continued to paddle for fish, not to mention how leisurely her life was. In addition to spying on the two professors, Hermione was also worried about the final exams that were about to start in more than 2 months. Okay, Hermione, you will definitely be the first in your grade. Irina held a bag of potato chips and persuaded Hermione, who was sorting out review materials. To be honest, Hogwarts doesn't have many first-year courses, and its theoretical knowledge is at best the amount of 1 week's courses in Irina's high school in her previous life. Although the homework assigned by various professors to the students has gradually increased during this period of time, but these are nothing to Irina and Hermione, who are top students, and they have completed their homework a long time ago. However, the attitudes of the two after finishing their homework were completely different. Irina upheld the attitude of carpe bliss, watching Harry and Ron play wizard chess while eating snacks, while Hermione was studying hard with a lot of textbooks. Irina, please. Hermione looked at Irina helplessly. The click sound of Irina eating potato chips tempted her all the time. Irina took out a piece of potato chips. There are so many little wizards in Hogwarts, if even Hermione and you can't pass the final exam, then I'm afraid they will all have to be kicked out and go home in despair. Come on, eat some potato chips. Hermione opened her mouth obediently, and Irina still fed the potato chips into her mouth obediently. At this moment, the two heard Ron's voice not far away. Hagrid. What are you doing in the library? Ron looked a little surprised. You know, Hagrid, as a gamekeeper, never comes to the library. Hagrid's eyes were hidden, as if there was something hidden behind his back. I was just taking a look. Harry stood up and asked. Wait, Hagrid, can you tell us besides Luwei, what other mechanisms protect the Sorcerer's Stone? How do you know? Hagrid exclaimed, but then his face darkened. Listen, come to me later. Remember, I didn't promise you anything, so don't talk nonsense here. There are some things that students should not know, they will think that I told you. See you later, Hagrid, Harry said, suppressing his excitement. And Irina was a little excited after watching the exchange between the two. If she read it right just now, the books behind Hagrid are all related to fire dragons, such as Fire Dragon Species in Britain and Ireland, From Dragon Eggs to Hell, Guide to Raising Fire Dragons, and so on. Hey, is there a strange thing mixed in? An hour later, the four of them knocked on the door of Hagrid's cabin. When the four of them came here, they found that all the curtains of the hut were drawn tightly, and they couldn't see anything inside, as if Hagrid was hiding something ulterior. Hagrid, you are too deliberate. Irina looked at the hut, feeling a little ashamed. Hagrid didn't open the door directly, but asked through the door. After learning that it was Irina and the others, Hagrid let them enter the house, and closed the door immediately after the four of them entered the house. The cabin was almost suffocatingly hot, and despite the warm sunshine there was still a blazing fire in the fireplace. Hagrid made tea for Irina and the others, and served Irina and the others with rock cakes. Irina took a look at the three people who were struggling to deal with the rock cakes with their pain masks on, hid them in her pocket while Hagrid wasn't paying attention, and then pretended that she had finished eating them. Upon seeing this, the three Harrys quickly followed suit. Oh, have you finished eating? You're welcome, I still have more. Seeing this, Hagrid planned to bring over another plate of rock cakes. Hearing this, the four of them felt their souls rising and quickly declined. Other people's snacks cost money, but Hagrid's snacks are terrible. In order to prevent Hagrid from taking his rock pie, Irina quickly changed the subject. Hagrid, I know you don't want to tell us about the mechanism that guards the Sorcerer's Stone, but in fact, we just want to confirm who it is. Did you design those mechanisms? Hermione nodded again and complimented Hagrid. We want to know, besides you, who else can Dumbledore trust? Hearing Hermione's words, Hagrid felt a little flustered, and he pushed out his chest vigorously. Seeing this, Harry and Ron also smiled. Well, it's okay to tell you. He borrowed Luwei from me, and then asked several other professors to perform magic. Let me think about it. Professor Sprout, Professor Flitwick, Professor McGregor, Professor Jeffrey, Professor Quirrell. Well, Professor Dumbledore himself cast a spell. Oh yes, I forgot one more person, Professor Snape. Hearing this, Harry, Ron and Hermione looked at each other in blank dismay. The truth that Hagrid told was exactly the same as what Irina had guessed before, which shocked the three of them. Irina, you are really amazing, Harry said incredulously. Ron also nodded vigorously. Yeah, it's as good as what Hagrid said. You are indeed the big sister. At this moment, Hermione looked at Hagrid and asked, Hagrid, are you the only one who knows how to pass Lu Wei? You won't tell anyone, and neither will the other professors. Nobody wants to know but me and Dumbledore, said Hagrid proudly. I would like to ask this gentleman who grew up drinking truth serum, what are you proud of? When she thought that Hagrid was just drinking and bragging, and then revealed the method through Lu Wei, Irina couldn't help but want to complain. That's great. Hagrid, can we open a window? I'm so hot, Harry said to Hagrid. But Hagrid rejected Harry. No, Harry, I'm sorry. At this time, Harry noticed Hagrid's eyes turning to the fire, and he looked over. Hagrid, what is that? Harry asked in disbelief. I saw a big black egg lying in the center of the fire. Is this a dragon egg? Hagrid. Irina walked up to the dragon egg with some excitement. She looked at the big black egg. Oh, said Hagrid, a little embarrassed, I won it, drinking in the village pub and playing cards with a stranger. To be honest, the man probably wanted to get rid of it. Irina's eyes were shining. She looked at Hagrid and asked, Hagrid, can I witness its birth? You know, I really like some cute little lives. Although creatures like fire dragons are not cute at all when they grow up, at least they are cute when they are young. Hagrid patted his chest without any hesitation. Of course, no problem. When the dragon eggs are about to hatch, I will ask Harry's Hedwig to send you a note. The people who got Hagrid's promise left the hut contentedly. And not long after Irina and the others left, a figure suddenly appeared outside Hagrid's cabin. The owner of the figure knocked on the door of the hut. Who? Hagrid's vigilant voice came. Irina and the others had just left. It was obvious that the four of them would not be coming, and the fire dragon's matter must not be let others know. It's me, Lynn Roll, we met last year, Lynn said calmly. After a while, the door of the hut was opened, and Hagrid poked his head out to look at Lynn. It's you, Mr. Roll, I don't know what you want from me, asked Hagrid. He remembered this student, and he took the same boat with this student when he welcomed the freshmen last year. In his impression, this student was a child with a strong magical talent, and he had praised him before. Lynn said softly, Hello, Mr. Hagrid, I heard that you got a dragon egg and plan to hatch it. Hearing this, Hagrid panicked. Where did this kid hear about it? No, you must have been deceived, there is no such thing. Hagrid flatly denied. Please don't refuse in a hurry, Mr. Hagrid, Lynn said calmly. He raised his right hand slightly, and a square iron piece with a side length of half a meter appeared in his hand. Actually, I am an alchemist. An alchemy product was made, which can perfectly simulate the flame environment needed for the hatching of fire dragons. As he spoke, Lynn injected magic power into the square iron sheet in his hand, and a ball of magical flame rose from the surface of the iron sheet, which looked very bluffing but not too hot. Seeing this scene, Hagrid's eyes lit up. From Lynn's words, Hagrid could tell Lynn's kindness. After a little thought, he invited Lynn into the room and made a pot of tea. Lynn cast his eyes on the dragon egg in the fireplace, and said, I am willing to give this alchemy product to Mr. Hagrid. In addition, I can also provide a space for young dragons to grow, a piece of furniture whose interior space is equivalent to 2 houses. A suitcase, and the suitcase was cast with alchemy, not the untraceable stretch charm, so it didn't break Ministry of Magic law. The alchemy circle used by Lynn to refine the suitcase comes from the storage array of the Mirror of Arise. After Lynn removes the alchemical runes that can freeze the time of items in the alchemy circle, its effect is equivalent to that of Newt Scamander's suitcase that had been cast with the powerful unmarking stretching spell. Of course, in order to allow the space inside the suitcase to allow living creatures to survive and strengthen its stability, Lynn also added a lot of alchemy circles learned in Nicole Flamel's cabin. Although Nicole Flamel mainly teaches the knowledge of Lynn's method of alchemy, alchemy is common in some knowledge points, and Lynn is an alchemist who practiced both formations and spells, so Nicole Flamel is in the when explaining the knowledge points, it is inevitable to mention the means by which array alchemy can achieve the same goal. Really, thank you so much, Mr. Roll. You are such a good boy. Hearing Lin N's words, Hagrid was overjoyed. He didn't expect that there would be such a good person in this world. But at this moment, Lin spoke again. But, Lin's voice made Hagrid's heart skip a beat. You know, I am an alchemist, and alchemy is about equal exchange. Looking at Lin N's calm eyes, Hagrid felt flustered for no reason. Then what do you want to get? Lin said softly. Some materials from precious magical animals, such as unicorn shed horns, unicorn feathers, and besides, after this fire dragon is born, I need a tube of its blood. With that said, Lin took out a syringe with a capacity of 100 milliliters from his arms. After learning the alchemy of the legal system from Nicole Flamel, and knowing how to combine the alchemy of the two systems of formation, Lin planned to use the alchemy of the formation and the alchemy of the legal system to refine a kind of alchemy that could an alchemical product that enhances his combat strength, and his idea was to imitate Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet in the movie. Through the refining of the legal system of alchemy, the glove body with magical power can be obtained, while the alchemy circle of the erase system of alchemy allows the glove to absorb the power of each gemstone and increase the user. Of course, this alchemy product does not necessarily have to look like a glove. After all, that appearance is too low. Before that, Lin planned to make the power gems for amplification. As for why it is a power gem, it is because in the book of legal alchemy taught by Nicole Flamel, there are records about the method of refining magic crystals that can increase power, which saves Lin from spending energy on conceive the alchemy plan. The raw materials required for the refining of this legal alchemy product include sufficient magic power, carriers of gems or crystals, and symbols of power. The first two raw materials were easily available to Lin, and the third symbol of power, Lin thought, was the blood of the fire dragon. In Lin N's view, fire dragons can definitely be regarded as representatives of power. However, only living fire dragons can represent power. Therefore, the dead fire dragon blood on the market cannot meet Lin's needs. Only fresh fire dragon blood can be counted. A symbol of power. This is why Lin needs the blood of this young dragon. 100 milliliters of blood is not too much of a burden for a fire dragon, even if it is just a newborn baby dragon, and the reward from Lin is too generous for Hagrid to refuse. So, Hagrid hesitated for a while and then agreed. Yes, but you must not hurt it. Only then did Lin show a smile. He saluted Hagrid, left the square iron piece and a suitcase taken out of thin air, and left Hagrid's hut. Now that he had Hagrid's permission, Lin N naturally had to start preparing for alchemy. Of course, Lin N must return to Roll Manor to refine the magic crystal that increases the power. After all, there are only 2 months left before the final exam, and Quirrell's threat has not yet been lifted, so Lin N all N has to do is prepare raw materials and alchemical knowledge. As for how to preserve the fire dragon blood after it is taken out, Lin believes that the alchemy circle that can freeze the time of the stored objects like the Mirror of Arised is a perfect solution. It's almost the end of the semester, so I'm very busy. Lin N rubbed the center of his eyebrows. What worried him was naturally not the easy final exam, but a certain Dark Lord lurking in the dark and ready to move. A few days later, one morning, Hedwig brought a note from Hagrid for Harry and the others. It's about to come out of its shell. There were only these 4 words on the note. Others may not understand the meaning of these 4 words, but Harry and the others are very clear about it. This is the little Charmander that is about to break out of its shell. After hearing the news, Ron immediately planned to skip class to find Hagrid. He thought that he might never see Charmander hatching a few times in his life, so what was going to class compared to this? Hermione firmly opposed this, but under Ron's nonsense, Hermione had to back down a step, and decided to go to Hagrid's cabin with everyone during the morning break to witness the birth of Charmander. When the first class of herb class in the morning was over, the bell had just rang in Hogwarts Castle, and Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Irina threw down their small shovels and headed straight for Hagrid's cabin go. To Hermione's surprise, Irina, who usually likes to fish and paddle in everything, is more active than anyone else this time. It seems that Irina really likes small animals, thought Hermione. However, after staying with Irina for a long time, she seemed to be almost assimilated by Irina, and she even forgot that fire dragons are not small animals at all. Hagrid greeted them now, looking flushed and excited. It's coming out soon. Hagrid spoke excitedly, and welcomed Irina and the others into the house. As soon as Irina entered the room, she found that the dragon egg was resting on a square iron sheet, and the iron sheet continuously spewed out flames. "Oh, this one was given to me by one of your seniors. It can perfectly simulate the environment where a fire dragon hatches." Noticing Irina's gaze, Hagrid happily introduced. Irina hesitated and said, "Hagrid, is the senior you mentioned named Roll?" Hagrid was a little surprised. "Yeah, you know each other." Irina pondered. It really was the senior Roll, but how did the other party know about Hualong? Was it a prophet, or was it because she was the same as herself? Just as Irina was doubting Lynn's identity, the movement of the dragon egg attracted her attention. "I saw the dragon egg lying on the iron sheet, and a deep crack suddenly appeared on it. Something was moving inside, and there was a very funny, click-click, sound. It seemed to sense that the fire dragon was about to hatch, and the flame on the iron piece dissipated by itself." At this time, everyone moved their chairs closer to the table, and they held their breath and watched closely. Suddenly, with a harsh scratching sound, the dragon egg cracked. "I saw a little Charmander waddling and fluttering on the iron sheet. It's not really pretty, it just looks like a crumpled black umbrella. Compared with its thin black body, its spiny wings look special. It is big, and it also has a long and big nose with white nostrils, horn bumps on its head, and orange-red eyes protruding outward." Charmander sneezed, and a few sparks spewed out of his nose. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" murmured Hagrid. He stretched out a hand and touched the head of Charmander, but the little Charmander turned around and bit his finger, showing its pointed long teeth. For this, Hagrid didn't feel any pain at all, but said excitedly, "Oh my God, you see, it knows its mother." Harry and Ron couldn't help but rolled their eyes. Seeing that the little Charmander looked fierce, as if it wanted to swallow Hagrid, "Do you think it took you as its mother?" Just when Harry and Ron didn't dare to approach because of the danger shown by Charmander, Irina walked forward happily. "So cute. Give me a hug from Charmander." Two little hearts seemed to appear in Irina's eyes. As soon as she grabbed the little Charmander, she stuffed it into her arms and stroked it gently. "Irina, be careful." Seeing this, Hagrid was taken aback, and he quickly stretched out his hand to stop Irina. Although Hagrid always called some dangerous magical animals cuties, he also knew that the attacks of these magical animals were fatal to little wizards, and so were the fangs of dragons. Maybe this little Charmander biting Hagrid would not be a big problem, but with Irina's delicate body, if she was bitten, she might have to lie down in the hospital. If the bite was not in the right place, she might even have to lie on the board. Just when Hagrid was extremely worried, Charmander's performance made him freeze in place. I saw Charmander lying comfortably in Irina's arms, showing an expression of enjoyment. After seeing Hagrid, it deliberately rubbed its head against Irina's chest, and then vomited at Hagrid. A little flame. Not only Hagrid, but even Harry, Ron and Hermione were stunned. "Good guy, this is a double-standard Charmander. Why?" Hagrid was about to cry, but Irina could touch it casually and enjoyed it very much. However, she just touched it once and was bitten viciously by it. Can the difference be so big? Hermione stood next to Irina and raised her head. "Hey, just because my Irina is beautiful." Charmander seemed to like the two girls, Irina and Hermione, and they still hugged and held them high, but Harry and Ron just leaned over, and Charmander blew at them. "If Harry and Ron, if you get any closer, the Charmander might bite you." Caressing the Charmander, Irina looked at Hagrid and asked, "By the way, Hagrid, did Senior Roar give you this alchemy product?" Hagrid nodded first, then shook his head. "It's not for nothing, he needs a tube of blood from this Charmander, but in addition, he also gave me a place where the Charmander can live." Quote. Hagrid said, taking out the suitcase. Hermione put her head into the suitcase, and when she saw the space inside, she couldn't help but exclaimed, "Is this a seamless stretch charm?" "But using the seamless stretch charm privately is illegal, right?" Hagrid explained. "Roel said this is alchemy, not the traceless stretching spell." Hermione nodded and said, "But even if there is such a space, I'm afraid Charmander can't live in it for too long. When Charmander grows older, this space won't be able to live in." While Hermione was discussing Charmander's life issues, Hagrid's expression suddenly changed. Hagrid's face suddenly turned white. He jumped up and ran towards the window. "What's going on?" Harry asked, confused. Hagrid was a little out of breath. "Someone peeked through the gap in the curtain just now." It was a boy. He was running to school. Hearing this, the four people immediately ran to the door and looked out, only to see Malfoy running quickly with his back to them, with a malicious smile on his face. Seeing this, Irina hurriedly chased out the door, planning to stop Malfoy. Although she planned to let Ron's brother Charlie, who worked at the dragon farm, take away Charmander like in the original book, she still hoped to see Charmander more before he left, and would send Charmander away before the final exam. Looking at Malfoy's back, Irina raised her hand and cast a freezing spell. An icy blue beam of light shot out of the sky and headed towards Malfoy. When he turned around and saw Malfoy attacking from behind, he was so frightened that Irina was already an extremely terrifying existence in his heart. He rolled around subconsciously and coincidentally escaped the freezing spell. However, this roll made him fall into the mud, which prevented Malfoy from escaping. You must not have seen anything, Malfoy. Irina showed a kind smile and looked at Malfoy, but her gaze made Malfoy shudder. Malfoy was so frightened that he quickly said, I didn't see anything, really. Irina held her head with her hands pretending to think, and then she seemed to think of something, and said with a smile, Oh, I know there is a way to make you forget everything you have seen, how about it? Forgetting spell. Irina raised her wand and put the index finger of her left hand under her lips. What is the spell? Let me think about it. Forget everything. Before Irina could finish reciting the spell, Hermione, who came over, thought that Irina was really going to attack Malfoy, so she quickly stopped Irina. Are you crazy? Use the Oblivion curse on others privately. It's illegal. Although Irina didn't finish her words, her purpose of scaring Malfoy had been achieved. I saw Malfoy looking at Irina with eyes full of horror. At this time, he wanted to give himself a big mouth. Why should he meddle in Irina's business? Oh, it's a pity. Little Hermione begs for mercy, so I can only reluctantly let you go. Irina deliberately looked regretful, but if I find out what happened today is known to others, so. Hearing this, Malfoy quickly said loudly, I promise not to tell anyone, I swear. Oh, Irina opened her eyes wide, so you really saw it? Irina said, raising the wand in her hand again. Seeing this, Malfoy rolled his eyelids in fear and fainted. Okay, Irina, he has been frightened and fainted. At this time, Hermione also understood that Irina didn't really mean to do anything to Malfoy, she said with a smile. Irina spread her hands. I can't help but be scared. At this time, Harry and Ron walked over with admiration on their faces, and Ron said, I'm afraid you are the only one who can scare Malfoy like this. I think Professor Snape can do it too. Irina tilted her head cutely. PFF'd. Harry couldn't help laughing, that's true. After returning to Hagrid's hut, Hermione looked at the lively Charmander and said, Hagrid, this is not an option. We have to send it away. Hearing Hermione's words, Hagrid exclaimed, No. Absolutely not. It's still so young, it will die. Charlie, Irina said, if I remember correctly, Ron's brother Charlie works in a dragon farm in Romania. I think we can let Charlie pick up the Charmander and raise it bigger before releasing it back into the wild. Ron, who was almost bitten by Charmander because of his missing hands, was the first to agree. Great. How about this plan, Hagrid? Although Hagrid was very reluctant to let go of Charmander, the cruel reality forced him to make up his mind to send Charmander away. He agreed that everyone would send an owl to ask Charlie. In the next week, Malfoy saw Irina like a mouse seeing a cat, and did not dare to look into her eyes. On Wednesday night, Hedwig slapped at the darkened window. Harry quickly put it in and opened the note it came with. After seeing the note, Irina, Hermione and Ron also came over. Dear Ron, are you okay? Thanks for writing me. I'm excited to adopt the Norwegian Ridgeback, but it's not easy to get him here. I thought the best thing to do would be to send it to a few friends of mine who were coming to visit me next week. The trouble is, they must not be seen illegally carrying a Norwegian fire dragon. Can you take a Ridgeback to the tallest tower at midnight on Saturday? They can meet you there and take the dragon away while it's dark. Please hear back from me as soon as possible. Love you, Charlie. Quote, after reading the note, Harry raised his head and said, It's not difficult, is it? With the suitcase here, we don't have to worry about what the Charmander makes, and the invisibility cloak can get us there safely. Everyone nodded and thought there was no problem, so Harry wrote a reply and asked Hedwig, who had just come back and not had time to rest, to go out again. This made Hedwig peck Harry several times before leaving angrily. The flames are blazing. At this time, Irina suddenly raised her wand, and a ball of flame poured out from the top of the wand, burning Charlie's letter. This letter cannot be kept. If others see it, it may affect our actions, Irina said. Saturday night, Harry and others arrived outside Hagrid's hut. They unexpectedly found that the door of the hut was open and the lights were brightly lit inside. And just as they entered the hut, they saw a boy standing in front of Hagrid. Hagrid, who is he? Harry asked subconsciously. Hagrid introduced. He is the lure I told you before. I called him here because I promised him to give him a tube of Charmander's blood. After hearing that Lynn was the Slytherin senior, Harry and Ron suddenly looked wary and looked at Lynn solemnly. Irina and Hermione were kind-hearted, and Hermione stepped forward and said, Senior Roar, thank you for saving me on Halloween. After learning that Lynn's healing medicine saved her on Halloween, Hermione wanted to thank Lynn in person, but they never had the chance to meet. Lynn nodded slightly to them, then looked at Hagrid. I'm very happy to be able to fulfill my previous agreement. Where is Charmander? Hagrid opened the suitcase in front of him. More than a week ago, this small room was no longer enough for Charmander, so Charmander had to live in the suitcase this week. After letting Charmander out, Hagrid drew a tube of blood for Charmander himself, and then returned the needle to Lynn. The contract is completed, thank you very much. Lynn nodded with a smile after taking the needle. Seeing Hagrid put Charmander back into the suitcase, Lynn, who was in a good mood, took the initiative and said, Are you going to send it away? I can go with you. If there is any emergency, I can also help solve it. Hearing Lynn's words, Harry and Ron wanted to decline politely, and Harry said, Sorry, Senior, our invisibility cloak probably won't hold 4 people. Lynn waved his wand, and his figure disappeared in place, and his casual voice came out, It's okay, I have the disillusionment charm. After speaking, Lynn's figure reappeared. Irina and Hermione readily agreed, and they naturally wished for the help of such a powerful senior. As for Harry and Ron, who still had an aversion to Slytherin, they saw that their 2 companions agreed, so they stopped objecting. So the 5 left Hagrid's hut and headed towards the tallest tower in the dark. Since Irina burned Charlie's letter with a fire spell after reading it, the letter was not obtained by Malfoy, and Malfoy's trouble naturally did not happen. The 5 of them smoothly walked up the spiral staircase to the top of the tower. After about 10 minutes, 4 broomsticks flew from a distance, and the owners of these 4 broomsticks also came to the top of the tower. They were all Charlie's friends. After learning that Charmander was placed in a suitcase blessed with alchemy, these friends of Charlie were pleasantly surprised. Not to mention how much trouble a suitcase can save them, the suitcase that comes with it alone is a good value. One of the men hangs his suitcase on the back of his broomstick, and bids a cheerful farewell to the crowd, and Charlie's friends are soon gone. However, just as everyone went down the spiral staircase smoothly and stepped into the corridor, an accident happened. As soon as they entered the corridor, Filch's face emerged from the darkness. Lynn sensed that there were people in the corridor in advance, so before entering the corridor, he subconsciously cast the disillusionment charm on himself, which saved him from being discovered by Filch. But the 4 of Irina were miserable. They didn't know the magic spell of disillusionment, and their invisibility cloak accidentally fell on the top of the tower. Especially Irina, she was extremely upset. She knew that this would happen, but she forgot about the invisibility cloak because she missed Charmander. Filch led the 4 unwilling people to Professor McGonagall's study. The 4 of them were Gryffindor students, so naturally they had to be dealt with by Professor McGonagall, the head of Gryffindor. I was so pissed off that 4 students didn't sleep in one night. I've never heard of such a thing before, said Professor McGonagall angrily. Don't worry, there are more than 4 students who don't sleep every night. Irina grumbled in her heart. Professor McGonagall scanned the 4 of them with a stern gaze, and she spoke angrily, especially you 2, Miss Lowell and Miss Granger, I thought you were very sober-minded. As for you, Mr. Tay and Mr. Weasley, I thought you all valued the honor of Gryffindor very much. The 4 of you will be locked up. Besides, Gryffindor will be deducted 50 points each. Professor McGonagall looked like a roaring lioness. Losing 200 points all of a sudden, even Irina was stunned. You know, in the original book, Malfoy's trouble caused Slytherin to be deducted 50 points, and Ron was bitten because he did not participate in this operation. But now, Slytherin did not deduct points, but Gryffindor deducted 50 points more, which directly widened the difference between the two houses. It seems that at the end of this semester, even Professor Dumbledore can't give them back the points. Irina thought helplessly. After all, in the original book, with Professor Dumbledore's extra points, Gryffindor only led Slytherin by 10 points, but this time the house had a 100-point advantage. Points, even if there is one more Irina, it is impossible to add it back. After being punished, Irina and the others were kicked out of the study by Professor McGonagall. The next day, after learning of the culprit who caused the college points to be deducted by 200 points, the four of Harry immediately became the target of Gryffindor. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were all sad and ashamed, but Irina kept her normal pace of life. Harry was puzzled by this. "I ask you, Harry, do you regret sending Charmander away?" Facing Harry's doubts, Irina asked. Harry shook his head. Of course he had no regrets. If Charmander was not sent away, Charmander would have no place to live one day. Once Charmander was discovered, what was waiting for him was to be taken away by the Aurors from the Ministry of Magic. Let's go, cramp and peel to become a pile of magic materials. Irina spread her hands. In this case, why do we need to be sad? As for the college points, I think if you two are willing to study seriously, it will not be difficult to add the college points back. After all, he and Imin gave Gryffindor more than 100 points this semester. Hearing this, Harry and Ron looked at each other in blank dismay. Their guilt towards other students made them determined to study hard. But just over a week later, the two of them, whose natures were hard to change, started their bad lives again. Time flies, and soon it's the last week before the final exam. And at breakfast on this day, Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Irina received exactly the same note, with the following sentence written in the note: "Your confinement starts at 11 o'clock tonight, find Phil in the hall, Mr. Chi." The signer is Professor McGonagall. Seeing this scene, Irina understood that the Forbidden Forest incident was about to begin. Irina knew that they were going to face Voldemort, who was possessed by Quirrell. Fortunately, Malfoy was not there this time, otherwise with the pig teammates, their hard work would be useless. In the evening, the four of them came to the foyer and followed Filch out of Hogwarts Castle. Filch chattered along the way, full of malice. Soon, everyone passed through the dark environment and arrived outside the Forbidden Forest, where they met Hagrid. After handing the four to Hagrid, Filch left. And just then, an unexpected person appeared. "Senior Luo, why are you here?" Irina asked in surprise. "I saw a figure appear out of thin air." It was obvious that Lin En had previously cast a phantom spell on himself. Lin said succinctly, "When you were arrested last time, I left early. As compensation, your confinement punishes me to walk with you this time." Lin En planned to go with Irina and others, naturally not because of any guilt, but because he knew that Voldemort, who possessed Quirrell, would enter the Forbidden Forest to hunt unicorns tonight to save his life. In order to weaken Quirrell and Voldemort's fighting power at the end of the school year, Lin planned to prevent them from sucking the unicorn's blood. However, Lin didn't know where Quirrell was in the Forbidden Forest. If he had to look for it on his own, he would be no different from a headless fly. During the Christmas holidays, Lin followed Harry to find the Mirror of Arised, which inspired Lin. As long as he followed the protagonists in the original book, Quirrell would naturally come to his door. "Thank you, Senior, for your help." Irina's eyes lit up. She had witnessed with her own eyes how Lin En used those alchemical products to kill the giant monster. Even the tall giant monster can be defeated, which shows how powerful Lin is. Hagrid was hesitant to speak. Strictly speaking, Lin En's behavior violated the school rules. After all, Lin En was not punished but came to the Forbidden Forest alone. He didn't know whether he should stop the other party. As if seeing Hagrid's hesitation, Lin said, "Hagrid, you also know the dangers of the Forbidden Forest. My magic level is not low and I can help." Hagrid originally wanted to refuse Lin En, but when he thought that there were still evil people in the Forbidden Forest who harmed the unicorns, and Lin En could indeed help a lot, he finally agreed to let Lin En stay. "Okay, Mr. Roar, please follow me closely," Hagrid said. Hagrid led everyone towards the inside of the Forbidden Forest, while introducing them to the current situation. Now listen carefully. What we are going to do tonight is very dangerous. I don't want anyone to be in danger. Look over there. Do you see that shining thing on the ground? Silvery white. That's the unicorn. The blood of the beast. Hagrid pointed at a pool of blood on the ground that was as white as moonlight. Seeing the unicorn blood on the ground, a look of pity appeared in Irina's eyes. Hagrid continued. A unicorn in the Forbidden Forest was injured by something. It was seriously injured. This is the second time this week. I found a dead one last Wednesday. We must try to find that poor unicorn and help it get out of pain. After walking for a while, Hagrid stopped. Next, we split into two groups, Hermione and Ron with me, Harry, Irina and Mr. Roar, and you and Fang together. If anyone finds the unicorn, he will fire green sparks, and when he meets trouble shoots red sparks, got it? Hagrid said to everyone. Fang is the hound at Hagrid's feet. From Irina's mouth, Hagrid learned that Lynn had strong magical power, so he put Harry and Lynn in a group, hoping that Lynn could ensure Harry's safety in the Forbidden Forest. Lynn and Irina had no objection, while Harry glanced at Ron and Hermione. After the two nodded, Harry walked towards Lynn. After watching Hagrid and the others leave, Lynn gently waved his wand, and dozens of metal blocks flew out of the canvas bag he had cast the seamless stretching charm on, floating around him, floating up and down. These metal blocks are his alchemical floating cannons. He relied on these alchemical floating cannons to kill the trolls on Halloween. What is this? Harry was startled by these alchemical floating cannons. Irina, on the other hand, had bright eyes. She watched one of the alchemy floating cannons blow up the giant monster's head with her own eyes. Lin said concisely and concisely, alchemy weapons are used to deal with the dangers that may occur next. Harry glanced at Lynn dubiously before leaning closer. The three of them walked towards the depths of the Forbidden Forest with Yaya. After walking for more than half an hour, they went deeper and deeper into the Forbidden Forest. The bloodstains of unicorns on the ground became more and more dense. Irina saw a lot of blood spattered on the roots of a crooked neck tree, as if the poor unicorn had struggled painfully nearby. At this time, the crowd found a clearing behind the tangled branches of an ancient oak tree. The scene in the open space shocked everyone. I saw a pure white thing shining on the ground. It was a unicorn. They had never seen such a beautiful creature, but it was already dead. Its long legs maintained the same position as when it fell. It was very uncomfortable, stretching naturally. Its mane is spread on the dark leaves, as white as pearls. Seeing this scene, Lynn and Irina thumped in their hearts at the same time. Obviously, there is only one kind of magic that can cause this kind of death, and that is the killing curse, one of the three unforgivable curses, Avada Kedavra. At the same time, a sliding sound sounded, and a hooded figure flashed out from the shadows in the distance. The owner of that figure crawled slowly on the ground, like a wild beast. The figure in the cloak came to the side of the unicorn, lowered his head, and wanted to suck the unicorn's blood from the wound on the side of the corpse. Seeing this scene, Harry and Irina tightly covered their mouths, watching this scene in disbelief. Seeing this sacred creature suffer such a shame after being killed, Irina's eyes were a little moist, and she looked very angry. Lynn saw ice blue light flickering in the palm of Irina's left hand, and he felt that the temperature around him was dropping. But just when Irina was about to cast the freezing spell and sneak attack the masked man, Lynn stretched out his hand to stop her and shook his head at her. Under Irina's confused gaze, Lynn put his left hand into his pocket. Immediately afterwards, Irina's eyes became horrified, and she saw Lynn taking out a round pineapple-shaped thing from his pocket. Grenade. Irina looked at Senior Roar next to her with a horrified expression. Why does Senior Roar have a weapon like a grenade in his hand? This is completely unreasonable. Under Irina's gaze, Lynn waved his wand to apply a sound-blocking magic to the MK2 grenade, then pulled out the safety pin of the MK2 grenade and threw it in the direction of the masked man. Since the magic blocked the sound of the MK2 grenade, and the MK2 grenade did not emit light like the magic spell, the masked man did not notice the grenade flying behind him at all. In fact, if the body of Voldemort is here, then the other party can easily detect the grenade with the super perception of the devil-level wizard. Unfortunately, Voldemort himself is still a remnant soul, and the possessed Quirrell he doesn't have that ability. I saw the MK2 grenade falling at the masked man's feet, exploding with a bang, and the terrifying flames and air waves spread out at lightning speed. There was a violent explosion, and not even the magic spell could cover it up. Not only that, this Mk2 grenade is also technically a type of fragmentation grenade. A large number of shrapnel shattered and hit the masked man less than 1 meter away from it like a hail of bullets. The sound of the fragments piercing into the flesh and blood was heard, and the blood mist exploded on the masked man's back, and the masked man's screams also came out. Waste, waste, Voldemort yelled at Quirrell crazily, but he was also a little flustered in his heart. You know, this is no ordinary grenade, this is Wong Wei's poem. Ah, this is a grenade enchanted by Lin's alchemy. With the blessing of the alchemy circle, the power of this grenade was geometrically multiplied. The terrifying flames burned the masked man, Quirrell's body, and the huge air wave with fragments lifted Quirrell's body away. Thanks to Quirrell standing in front and catching all the fragments with his body, the fallen unicorn's body was not destroyed by the grenade. Asshole, Quirrell's hoarse voice came, and the pain coming from behind made him almost unable to stand. But at this moment, Quirrell rolled his eyes, and a strange aura filled the air from his body. Obviously, Voldemort is possessed. Avada Kedavra. As soon as Voldemort took control of Quirrell's body, he quickly turned around and shot a death curse in Lin's original direction. The tearing of the wound caused by the rotation of the body made Quirrell's body instinctively scream in pain, but Voldemort didn't care at all. He was so angry that he decided to tear these sneak attackers into pieces. On the other side, Lin had changed his position after throwing the grenade, which allowed him to avoid Voldemort's death curse. However, when Quirrell turned around, Harry felt a sharp pain penetrate his head. He fell down in pain, and the scar on his forehead seemed to be on fire, which blurred his vision and staggered back. "Yeah, carry Harry behind your back to find Hagrid and the others." Irina quickly pulled out her wand and shot a red spark into the sky, then ordered Fang. After the sparks were fired, Irina lay down on the ground without hesitation, not caring that the dirt on the ground soiled her clothes and face. A Cruciatus curse flew dangerously over Irina's head. If Irina hadn't reacted in time, she might have been hit. Fang flipped Harry onto him and quickly ran away. Irina rolled to her feet, flicked her left hand, and an icy blue beam of light flew out in the direction of Quirrell. Not far away, a ball of flame turned into the shape of a poisonous snake and flew tightly against the ground in the direction of Quirrell, while dozens of alchemy floating cannons around Lin also began to accumulate power. Shattered to pieces. Expelliarmus. Thunderbolt explosion. While controlling the flames with his left hand, Lin's right hand holding the wand was not idle either. A series of highly offensive spells turned into beams of light and went straight towards Quirrell. Armor protection. Facing the joint attack of Lin and Irina, Voldemort's face was ashen, but he had no choice but to cast an armor spell. Although Voldemort is not afraid of these curses at all, Quirrell cannot. If Quirrell dies, he can only return to the state of a remnant soul. The invisible shield blocked Irina's freezing spell and all Lin's spells. The fire snake that was clinging to the ground and planning to attack was stopped immediately by Quirrell, controlled by Voldemort. Avada Kedavra. Voldemort controlled Quirrell and waved his wand again, and another beam of green light exploded in the direction of Lin. Even though it was Quirrell's body, Avada Kedavra, Voldemort's famous technique, was still extremely terrifying when he used it. The green beam flew so fast that even Lin could not avoid it in time. With no other choice, Lin had no choice but to control an alchemical floating cannon in front of him to block the life-killing curse. There was an explosion, and this green beam of light bombarded the alchemical floating cannon, blowing the alchemical floating cannon into fragments all over the sky. Looking at the broken alchemical floating cannons, Lin felt heartbroken. You must know that these alchemical floating cannons are alchemy products made by Nico Flamel himself. Each of these can be used less. Just when Lin was hesitating whether to take out the forbidden demonic fire as his trump card, the frequency of Irina's attacks actually increased greatly. You dare to harm such a cute and holy creature like a unicorn. Voldemort, you really have no heart. Irina muttered in her mouth. Angry, she ignored the intense consumption of magic power and opened her bow left and right. Her left hand kept waving, and her right hand was also controlling the wand. The freezing spell was like a laser cannon, constantly flying out of Irina's hands, turning into ice blue beams of light that filled the sky and blasted away in the direction of Quirrell. At the same time, the dozens of alchemical floating cannons around Lin En also completed charging, and dozens of golden beams turned into meteors all over the sky, spreading towards Quirrell like a hail of bullets. Even a powerful wizard like Voldemort would have difficulty resisting such a violent attack while controlling Quirrell. This storm-like attack made Voldemort strongly suspect that what he was facing was not a first or second-year wizard at all, but an entire group of Aurors. No, I'm afraid not even an entire regiment of Aurors can launch such an attack. Li Huo. Looking at the beam of light that filled the sky, Voldemort's heart became ruthless, and he directly controlled Quirrell to release a large area of fianfire. You must know that Li Huo is a kind of magical fire that can continuously become more powerful. These fires can mimic the form of some monsters and continue to hunt down almost any flammable object regardless of friend or foe. Even Voldemort has to use the 10,000 curses. Only this powerful spell can extinguish fianfire. Seeing this, Lin En was shocked. Although he has a strong affinity for flames, he is not sure whether this kind of fianfire, which is like a necrosis, can be controlled by him. The ground is freezing and the sky is freezing. Irina fired another ice blue beam, hitting fianfire in the distance. However, this freezing curse couldn't stop fianfire's expansion at all, and the terrifying fianfire kept attacking here. No matter, forbidden demon fire. Lin En gritted his teeth and flicked his left hand. A flame with black lines that looked somewhat similar to Li Huo gradually grew in size, and finally turned into a huge fireball with a diameter of 5 meters. This huge fireball is already half of his inventory. The fire of the forbidden demon rushed in the direction of Li Huo. The power of the fire to devour everything collided with the power of the fire of the forbidden demon to seal the magic, forming a rivalry. Seeing this, Voldemort manipulated Quirrell to release Fianflame again, and more powerful Fianflame flooded towards Lin and Irina. These fiery fires immediately forced Lin En's forbidden fire back, and Lin En had no choice but to withdraw his own. Just when Lin and Irina were feeling a little desperate, several gentle and somewhat stern voices came from behind them. All curses end. Chapter 71. An invisible wave of magic power spread out, and the terrifying fierce flame was extinguished in an instant after touching the wave of magic power. Lin and Irina turned around suddenly and saw Professor McGonagall, Professor Sprout, Professor Flitwick and Professor Snape. The 4 deans of the college appeared behind them, looking at them with vigilant eyes. Looking at Voldemort possessing Quirrell in the distance. Kids, get behind us. Professor Sprout's soft voice came, and she pulled Lin and Irina behind her. The other 3 professors took action. Professor Flitwick raised his hand and cast a silent disarming spell, while Professor McGonagall waved her wand, turning the dead branches and leaves at her feet into dozens of ferocious tigers and lions. Pounced in the direction of Quirrell. Even Professor Snape was not stingy at all with his magic power. One after another, the sharp edge hit Quirrell's direction without a shadow. Seeing that the 4 deans had arrived, Voldemort also understood that he had lost his best chance. Thunderbolt explosion. Voldemort controlled Quirrell and almost exhausted the magic power in Quirrell's body. The explosive spell carrying a terrifying aura broke out of the air and suddenly bombarded the ground not far ahead. The soil exploded, and the dust in the sky was swept by the air waves and rushed towards the direction of everyone. The smoke from the explosion enveloped the entire open space. This explosive spell blew the animals transformed by Professor McGonagall into pieces, and even the spells of Professor Flitwick and Professor Snape were blocked by the gravel and soil in the air. Facing the field surrounded by thick fog, the 4 professors did not dare to rush after them. After all, their students are still here, and it is impossible for them to ignore their safety. The 4 professors were back to back, surrounding Lin and Irina, watching everything around them warily. After an unknown amount of time, the smoke dissipated and Quirrell was nowhere to be found. Irina looked at the professors who were protecting her and was immediately moved. She was such a responsible and good professor. Even Professor Snape made people feel safe. I'm sorry, Miss Lovell, I didn't know there were dark wizards here. Professor McGonagall turned around and looked at Irina guiltily. She originally thought that there was just some kind of magical animal causing trouble in the Forbidden Forest, so she planned to let Irina and Harry come to the Forbidden Forest and follow Hagrid to learn more about it, but she never expected that the culprit behind the death of the unicorn would be he turned out to be a heinous dark wizard. Irina shook her head and said, "It's okay, Professor, we can't be fine. Thanks to Senior Roar's flame, otherwise." With that said, Irina seemed to realize something and immediately fell silent. The forbidden fire that Lin En used just now is obviously not an ordinary flame spell. After all, how can an ordinary flame spell be evenly matched with Li Huo? From this point of view, that kind of flame must be Lin En's method to suppress the situation. The opponent even used this kind of trump card, but he. Thinking of this, Irina looked at Lin subconsciously, with apologetic eyes. Feeling Irina's gaze, Lin En shook his head and said it was okay. Although the forbidden fire is one of his trump cards, this is the alchemy method that Lin obtained from Nickel Flammel. If Dumbledore wants to know, then the other party will definitely know it through Nickel Flammel. Lin had no need to hide his details from the professors at Hogwarts. As long as the Forbidden Fire's trump card is not discovered by Voldemort or the Death Eaters before the battle against Voldemort at the end of the school year, then Lin's goal will be achieved. After all, one of the purposes of researching the Forbidden Fire was to suppress the remnant soul of Voldemort after leaving Quirrell's body, and the trump card used was not a trump card, but an open card. As for the battle just now, the Forbidden Fire only demonstrated its ability to compete with the powerful fire, and its power to seal magic has not been noticed by Voldemort for the time being. It was only then that Professor McGonagall noticed Lin, and she said sternly, "Mr. Roar, I think it's curfew time now, right?" Lin said softly, "Sorry, Professor, I know I violated the school rules." Seeing that Professor McGonagall seemed to want to punish Lin, Irina quickly interceded for Lin. Irina looked at Professor McGonagall with tears in her eyes, and her voice became cute. "Professor, don't blame Senior Luoer. If he hadn't taken action, I would have been burned to ashes by that terrifying flame. He saved my life twice." "Oh, because Mr. Roar violated the school rules, Slytherin deducted 50 points, but because Mr. Roar saved his classmates, Slytherin gained 50 points. As for the punishment of confinement, let's waive it." Professor McGonagall shook her head, deciding that the merits were equal to the faults. "Wait, Miss Lowell," Professor McGonagall suddenly raised her head, seeming to notice something. "Did you just say that Mr. Rowe saved your life twice?" Before Irina could speak, Lin stood up. He nodded slightly and said, "I also killed the troll on Halloween last time." Hearing this, not only Professor McGonagall, but also the other three professors looked over in shock. Especially Professor Snape. He checked the senior Slytherin students at that time, but he couldn't find anyone who met the requirements. He never expected that this Slytherin student who could kill giant monsters alone turned out to be just one. A second-grade little wizard. "You mean, you killed that giant monster?" Professor Snape's face was close to Lin's, and his low tone brought endless pressure. Lin nodded calmly. Although it was unbelievable that a second-year wizard could kill the troll, with Irina's testimony, the four professors had no choice but to believe this fact. "Well, come back to the castle with us, children." Professor McGonagall felt like her head was about to explode. Today, she first met a dark wizard, and then she heard the news of such an explosion, which overloaded her CPU. Irina asked, "Where are Harry and the others?" Professor McGonagall said, "Hagrid's hound Fangfang found Hagrid behind Harry's back, and after we discovered the situation here, we asked Hagrid to take them back first." Irina let out a sigh of relief. "That's good." After returning to Hogwarts Castle, Lin left with his dean, Professor Snape, while Irina returned to the Gryffindor common room, and saw the anxious Harry. "Three people. Irina, are you okay? I heard from Harry that you met a terrible dark wizard." Hermione threw herself into Irina's arms, her eyes welling up. You know, she almost lost her best girlfriend. Irina had lingering fears. Alive, but almost died. Irina's words frightened the three of them, and Hermione felt relieved after checking her body carefully and making sure that she was not injured. "Irina, what happened next?" Harry asked impatiently. Irina narrated what happened next. Of course, she concealed Lin's use of the forbidden fire. "That Senior Luoer is so powerful. Of course, Irina, you are also very powerful. I didn't expect you to be able to fight against a dark wizard of this level." Hermione marveled. Unlike Harry and Ron, Hermione was well protected by Irina, and she didn't have much aversion to Slytherins except Malfoy. Therefore, after learning about Lin En, she immediately showed her admiration. Harry asked very puzzledly, "By the way, why did the Dark Wizard kill the unicorn? He seems to want to drink the unicorn's blood." Hearing this, Irina lowered her eyes. She felt a little depressed. Just listen to her explanation. Because the blood of unicorns can extend a person's life. However, killing such a pure and weak and helpless life as a unicorn is an extremely cruel thing. Having nothing but wanting only those who have gained everything will commit such a heinous crime, so from the moment the unicorn's blood touches that man's lips, he will have a half-dead life, a life that is forever cursed. Harry was in disbelief. But why? If you have to be cursed for the rest of your life, you might as well die, right? Irina shook her head, still a little sad. Having said that, what if that person just wants to use it to delay his life? Don't forget, there is another item in Hogwarts Castle that can completely restore his magic power and something of life, something that can make him live forever. A Philosopher's Stone, Hermione exclaimed, as if she understood something. Irina nodded and said, "Yes. If that person has been dormant for more than 10 years and is eager to make a comeback." "You mean," Ron also exclaimed, "mysterious man." After hearing the words of the three people, Harry felt an iron claw suddenly grasp his heart. He remembered what Hagrid once said to himself, "Some people say he is dead, but I think that is pure nonsense. He probably doesn't have much humanity left in him, so he can't be willing to die." "I understand," Harry shouted loudly. "Snape wants to get the Philosopher's Stone for Voldemort. Voldemort is waiting in the Forbidden Forest. We thought Snape just wanted to get rich from the Philosopher's Stone." Irina touched her forehead again. "No, can this guy let Sri Lanka take the blame?" "No, Harry, I think you misunderstood," Irina said helplessly. "I'm afraid Professor Snape is innocent. When we almost died, Professor Snape and 3 other professors came out to protect us. He should be a good person after saving us." Hearing Irina's words, Harry was stunned, and then fell into self-doubt. Who else but Snape? Quirrell, Harry thought. While Harry was thinking wildly, Irina interrupted his thinking. "But no matter what, that person will definitely come to steal the Sorcerer's Stone, right?" "Yes," Harry suddenly realized. "As long as they can protect the Philosopher's Stone, it doesn't matter who comes, right?" On the other side, Professor Snape did not let Lynn go back to his dormitory to sleep, but took him to his office. "So, you were the one who killed the troll on Halloween?" Professor Snape looked directly at Lynn and said softly. "Yes, Professor." Lynn nodded. "Well," Professor Snape's voice was like a ghost, "assuming what you said is true, then Mr. Roar, please tell me, how did you kill the troll?" Looking at Professor Snape, who was like a big bat with teeth and claws, Lynn's expression did not change. "If you have asked Professor Dumbledore, I think you should know that I have studied alchemy, and my master is Nico. Mr. Flammel." Hearing this, Professor Snape was stunned. He indeed did not know about this matter. "Alchemy aside, how do you explain the traces of flames on the scene? I don't think a second-year wizard can release such a powerful fire spell." Professor Snape stared into Lynn's eyes, as if he wanted to see something. Lin En raised his left hand, and a flame ignited out of thin air. "What if that's the case?" Lynn said softly. "Silent and wandless casting." Seeing this, even Professor Snape became uneasy. Wizards who can cast spells silently and without a wand at least have the combat power of an elite Auror, and it is not surprising that an elite Auror can cast such a fire spell. However, how could a second-year wizard learn to cast spells silently and without a wand? Even he himself only learned to cast spells silently and without a wand in his 20s. After realizing that he had lost his composure, Professor Snape quickly pretended to be cold. "Ah, you are indeed a genius student of Slytherin, Mr. Roll. Lin En is neither humble nor arrogant. I can't say I'm a genius, it's just that I work a little harder than my peers." At this time, Lynn's importance in Professor Snape's heart had increased several notches. Faced with this kind of talented student who was rare in a century, he naturally hoped to train him well. "You can go back, Mr. Roll." After taking a long breath, Professor Snape's voice was still cold, but it seemed much softer than before. "Professor, good night." Lynn leaned slightly, and then left Professor Snape's office. After the office door was closed, Professor Snape was thoughtful. Such a talent, I'm afraid Dumbledore was nothing more than that when he was young. If he can cultivate it well, he will definitely be able to do something in the future. It's just that, is he the future hope of the magic world, or a new storm? Professor Snape lowered his head in thought. He thought of Voldemort, who was equally gifted when he was young. Since he would kill trolls for the sake of classmates he had never met before, and even face powerful dark wizards, his nature should not be bad. As long as the acquired training is in place and he is not allowed to go astray, then in the future. Hey, let the people in the future worry about things in the future. By then, he will be old, and when Voldemort is completely dead, then he may be able to truly atone for his sins. Ah, I really want to see her again, even just once. Professor Snape saw a picture frame not far away, and inside the picture frame was a young girl with dark red hair. Soon, the day came for the final exam. The atmosphere in the entire Hogwarts castle was gloomy. Even a top student like Hermione would still feel nervous when facing an exam. Even after Hermione finished the exam, she would ruefully murmur about her fundamentals. There is no need to memorize certain knowledge points. Of course, it's hard to say whether Hermione's behavior was seen as nervousness or Versailles in the eyes of others. In this final exam, apart from the little badgers who messed up every day, the two people who felt the most relaxed were probably Lynn and Irina. The two men, whose own combat prowess was comparable to that of Auror's, naturally passed a pediatric test such as the final exam for first and second year wizards with ease. However, Irina is not sure to surpass Hermione in terms of scores. Like Lynn, she is also a partial student. She is also not very talented in potions and other courses, so she will definitely not be able to compare with everyone. The outstanding Hermione. Among the required courses, Defense Against the Dark Arts, Transfiguration, Charms, Herbal Medicine and History of Magic are her strengths, while Potions is her weakness, which complements Lynn. After the tense atmosphere of the final exam was over, Harry and others finally had time to think about guarding the Philosopher's Stone. At this moment, Harry suddenly discovered an extremely serious problem. Everyone, I noticed something is wrong. Do you think the person who brought Hagrid the fire dragon egg might have gone to contact him on purpose? Harry said seriously to the three of Irina. Irina nodded slightly. It seemed that Harry had some brains. Hermione's eyes became serious and she said, I understand, let's go find Hagrid and ask. As a result, the four people left Hogwarts Castle resolutely and ran across the lawn towards the Forbidden Forest. Meanwhile, Hagrid was sitting on a chair outside his hut, shelling peas. After seeing the four Irinas arriving, Hagrid smiled. Hello, the exam is over. Do you want a cup of tea? Okay, thanks. Ron was about to agree, but was interrupted by Harry. Harry asked eagerly. No, we have an emergency. Hagrid, I have something to ask you. Do you still remember the night you won the fire dragon egg while playing cards? The stranger you played cards with looked like what does it look like? I don't know, Hagrid said casually, completely unaware of what he had done. He refused to take off his cloak. Harry, Ron, and Hermione all showed expressions of astonishment. Seeing this, Hagrid looked at everyone with strange eyes and said, What's so strange about this? There are always some weird people looking after the Pig's Head bar. Maybe that guy is a smuggler who resells fire dragons. Quote. Before Hagrid finished speaking, Irina got straight to the point. Hagrid, have you ever told that person about the three-headed dog? Hearing this, Hagrid pondered for a while, and actually nodded, saying, I think he said it. I wanted his fire dragon egg, but he said he had to find out whether I could deal with the fire dragon, so I told him that even Lu Wei can deal with it, a dragon is nothing. What else did he ask? Is he curious about Lu Wei? Irina asked calmly. Hagrid thought for a while and continued. He was really curious, so he asked me how I did it. I told him that Lu Wei is actually very easy to deal with. You just need to know how to calm it down and play some music for it. Listen, it fell asleep immediately. Irina was immediately speechless. I think, Hagrid, you didn't grow up taking Veritaserum potion. You are so frightened that you didn't turn into a human after practicing Veritaserum potion, right? At this time, Hagrid seemed to realize that he had said something he shouldn't have said, and suddenly showed a horrified expression. I shouldn't tell you this, forget what I said. Hey, where are you going? Quote. Harry had already taken the lead and ran towards Hogwarts Castle, followed closely by Ron and Hermione. Although Irina was a little helpless, she had no choice but to follow them. Actually, Harry, you don't need to be so anxious. Voldemort can't get the Philosopher's Stone without you. In the foyer of the castle, Harry and others found Professor McGonagall passing by. Hermione hurried forward and said to Professor McGonagall, "Professor, we want to see Professor Dumbledore." "Want to see Professor Dumbledore?" Professor McGonagall was a little puzzled. "Why?" Harry subconsciously said, "This is a secret." Hearing this, Professor McGonagall looked cold. She said coldly, "Professor Dumbledore left 10 minutes ago. He received an urgent letter sent by an owl from the Ministry of Magic and flew to London immediately." Just as Harry threw his vigilance into the clouds because of his anxiety, and was about to speak recklessly, Irina held him back. "Sorry, Professor, we were the ones who were abrupt, we'll leave immediately." Irina apologized to Professor McGonagall, then gave Hermione a wink, and the two dragged Harry out of the hall. After Professor McGonagall disappeared from view, Irina finally breathed a sigh of relief and let Harry go. At this time, Harry was very angry. He asked Irina, "Irina, what are you doing? What if you don't tell Professor McGonagall that the Sorcerer's Stone was stolen?" "Harry, calm down first," Irina said calmly, "think about it with your head. Do you think Professor McGonagall would believe that someone stole the Philosopher's Stone?" Harry choked for words. Harry was a little devastated. "Originally, we just wanted to monitor Snape and prevent him from stealing the Philosopher's Stone, but the incident in the Forbidden Forest ruled out his suspicion, and now we don't even have anyone to monitor," Irina said softly. "However, even if there is such a goal, with your and my magic level, how can you ensure that our surveillance will not be discovered? If we are discovered by that villain, I am afraid that the other party will be more cautious. Steal the Philosopher's Stone without anyone knowing. There is no other way," Harry said desperately. "I will sneak out of here tonight, and I will try to get the Sorcerer's Stone first, so that Voldemort can't get the Sorcerer's Stone." Ron exclaimed, "You're crazy." Hermione also felt incredible. "You can't do this, you will be fired." Harry growled angrily, analyzing the stakes of the matter. Eventually, Ron and Hermione were persuaded by him. And Irina also agreed to do so. Although Harry's behavior is suspected of giving away the head thousands of miles away, and the courtesy is light and affectionate, but only if Voldemort is beaten back to the state of remnant soul in this incident, they will be able to fight in the next 2 school years. Quiet. Otherwise, if Voldemort is allowed to continue to attach to Quirrell and leave, then Voldemort, who has a wizard body, even if he is only possessed, can make great use of the still active Death Eaters to create a huge storm. At night, the 4 Harrys quietly came to the Gryffindor common room, and met Neville, who mustered up the courage to stop the 4 from violating school rules. In desperation, Hermione used a full-body restraint spell to control Neville. Then he led the 3 of them out of the Gryffindor common room. On the way to the 4th floor, they also met Peeves. Fortunately, Harry pretended to be Bloody Barrow and scared him away. In just a few minutes, the 4 of them arrived outside the corridor on the 4th floor. Harry looked at the door, his heart skipping a beat. The door had been opened a crack, and it was obvious that they were late. "It seems that the villain has passed Lu Wei. We have to speed up and try to stop him before he takes away the magic stone," Harry said anxiously. The 4 of them also quickened their pace, and Harry pushed the door open. This door was also really old. When Harry pushed it open, it kept making a creaking noise. This noise actually woke up the 3-headed dog Lu Wei. "Here comes the harp." Irina saw a harp at Lu Wei's feet. She quickly waved her wand and cast the flying spell to summon the harp into her hand. Irina played the harp quickly. Although her musical skills were not that strong, at least it was considered music. As the melodious sound of the piano played, Lu Wei's eyelids drooped downwards, his body swayed, and then he plopped down on the floor again and fell into a deep sleep. Although Lu Wei fell asleep, Irina did not stop playing the piano. She used her eyes to signal the 3 of them to enter the trapdoor quickly. Harry looked at the bottomless hole inside the trapdoor. He was a little scared, but he didn't have time to think too much and jumped in with his eyes closed. Ron and Hermione followed closely behind. While playing the harp, Irina came to the trapdoor. She dropped the harp and jumped into it. Lu Wei woke up outside the trapdoor, but its huge body was unable to chase the 4 people, so it had to incompetence rages outside. At this moment, another figure appeared at the door of this room. Has it started yet? Oh, how can a bug living in the gutter all day deserve to tarnish the master's work? Lynn walked slowly towards the trapdoor. Dozens of alchemical floating cannons have appeared around him, floating in all directions. The golden luster shining on these alchemical floating cannons indicates that they have completed charging. The 3-headed dog Luwei in the room noticed Lin's presence, and it roared and wanted to tear Lin, the intruder, into pieces. Seeing this, Lin waved his right hand holding the wand lightly, and a burst of purple light burst out, instantly knocking the huge 3-headed dog several meters away. Lu Wei's body fell heavily to the ground and passed out. Lin let go of his left hand. In the palm of his metal glove, a magic crystal used to store magic power lost its original luster and dimmed. This glove is his temporary refining equipment, which can be used as a bridge connecting Lin and outside magic products, absorbing the magic power of the magic crystal for his own use. Although Lin En made this according to the template of the Infinity Gauntlet, its function is very simple and simple. Apart from absorbing external energy to supply Lin En, it has no effect, and it cannot even be equipped with a power crystal to increase Lin En's power. Lin En understood that Voldemort would never hold back when he faced him directly, so he had to increase the power of his spell, and borrowing the energy of foreign objects was a good way. Although only one's own strength is one's own, there is also an old saying that a gentleman is born with no difference, and good and false are better than things. The reason why Lin En was able to knock away the 3-headed dog Lu Wei and make him unconscious was because he borrowed the magic power of the magic crystal in his hand. Lin discarded the magic crystal that had exhausted its magic power, then cast a layer of illusion on himself and the surrounding alchemical floating cannons, and headed towards the trapdoor. Meanwhile, in the last room, Quirrell broke through the flames and walked into the room. Not far from him, there is a tall mirror, which is the mirror of Arise. This mirror is the key to finding the Philosopher's Stone. Quirrell said to himself, only Dumbledore can come up with such a thing. Quirrell turned his gaze to the mirror of Arise, and in the scene presented by the mirror of Arise, he saw the Sorcerer's Stone. I saw the Philosopher's Stone, and I'm dedicating it to my master. But where is it? Looking at the mirror of Arise, Quirrell was a little confused. At this time, Voldemort on the back of Quirrell's head spoke, this is an alchemical product. Maybe the Sorcerer's Stone is in it. Otherwise, there will be nothing else in this room. Master, Quirrell said respectfully, then how do we get it? Voldemort pondered for a while, and said, maybe you need to express your desire for the Sorcerer's Stone to it, so that it will give you the Sorcerer's Stone. Quirrell nodded and looked at the mirror of Arise again. I need the Philosopher's Stone, I want to dedicate it to my master, so that my master can be resurrected. Quirrell stared at himself holding the Philosopher's Stone in the mirror of Arise, muttering words. At this moment, Quirrell found himself in the mirror of Arise smiling, and would take out a bright red stone from his pocket, which was the Philosopher's Stone, and then put it back into his pocket. At the same time, Quirrell felt that something heavy had actually fallen into his pocket. Quirrell looked surprised and quickly reached into his pocket and took out the heavy thing. However, the appearance of this thing was beyond Quirrell's expectation. This is a round pineapple-shaped thing. A part on the top seems to have been removed and is smoking. Master, this doesn't seem to be the Sorcerer's Stone. Quirrell fiddled with the round pineapple-shaped thing in confusion and said to Voldemort on the back of his head. Voldemort felt that he was going crazy when he felt the weak and familiar magic power fluctuations brought by the alchemical circle coming from this round pineapple-shaped thing. Trash, you've been cheated. Throw it away immediately. Now. Voldemort roared crazily, and his rage made Quirrell feel like his head was about to explode in pain. Quirrell didn't hesitate and immediately threw the round pineapple-shaped thing in his hand. However, as soon as the MK2 grenade was released, a violent explosion occurred. The familiar air waves swept over the MK2 grenade fragments and destroyed Quirrell's body. If Quirrell had not been a wizard with extremely strong magic power to nourish his body, otherwise as an ordinary person, he would have been less than a mile away. Faced with the explosion of the MK2 grenade in the case of MI, or the explosion of the MK2 grenade enchanted by the alchemical circle, I am afraid that he will be killed in an instant. But even if Quirrell was not killed by the MK2 grenade, he had already fallen to the ground, with more air coming out and less air coming in. Quirrell's body was covered with shrapnel, and the skin on his front was covered with scorch marks, looking like a blackened coal. Waste! Waste! Voldemort roared and continued to punish Quirrell with magic power, which made Quirrell dizzy with pain. But soon, Quirrell rolled his eyes, and his eyes looked much weirder. Obviously, this is Voldemort once again taking control of Quirrell's body. Voldemort manipulated Quirrell to wave his wand, cast several healing spells on himself in a row, and used a powerful disappearing spell to accurately disappear the shrapnel on his body. Only at this moment did Quirrell successfully stand up. Fortunately, this is a magical world, and the magic of magic can heal all physical damage. Otherwise, even if Quirrell is not dead, he is definitely not far away from death. This body is really weak. Just a few powerful healing spells and disappearing spells, and the magic power was consumed by 30%. Voldemort cursed secretly and handed control of his body back to Quirrell. At this time, Quirrell was on the verge of tears. He obviously did what Voldemort said, but who knew there would be such a dangerous situation in the magic mirror? Keep thinking of a way. If you can't get the magic stone, you'll get some good results. Voldemort said viciously. Hearing this, Quirrell shuddered suddenly. He still remembered the scene where he was punished by Voldemort on the back of his head with the Cruciatus curse because of his ineffectiveness in one thing. That's really a matter of life and death. Thinking of this, Quirrell quickly walked around the mirror of Arised, looking for a way to crack it. On the other side, the four of Irina fell into a devil's net, and the vines of the devil's net wrapped around their bodies. The flames are blazing. Although Harry's magic level is not high, under Irina's influence, he immediately thought of the fire spell. Sure enough, after encountering something bright and warm like flames, the devil's net continued to recede, loosening the entanglement on the four of them, and the four of them seized the opportunity to escape from control and came to a stone corridor. Irina chanted a spell to extinguish the flames, and then the three of them walked along the stone corridor with Harry. This corridor is like the underground passage of Gringotts, and it goes all the way down. Irina feels that the altitude she is at is probably lower than the Slytherin common room. After walking for a few minutes, they came to the end of the corridor, and what stood in front of them was a brightly lit room, with countless jewel-like birds flying around in the air, and on the opposite side of the room was a heavy wooden door. Irina took a closer look and found that these things were not birds at all, but keys one after another. Obviously, one of these keys is the key to open this door. The curse stops immediately. Irina waved her wand, and a strange wave of magic power spread from her wand. Bang 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 bang. Nearly a third of the keys fell to the ground under the action of the universal breaking spell, but the remaining keys seemed to have been so powerfully spelled that they were not affected by Irina's magic. However, after removing 1/3 of the distracting items, the remaining keys also appeared to be clear at a glance. Look, it should be the key. Harry, look at you. Now Hermione pointed to one of the keys, a silver key with drooping blue wings. Harry saw a row of broomsticks in the corner, and without hesitation he got on one of the broomsticks and chased after the key. With the quality of Harry, the seeker of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, it is not difficult to catch a key. After just a few breaths, Harry grabbed the key and jumped off the broom. Quick, Harry, Ron shouted. Harry quickly came to the heavy door, inserted the key in, and turned it hard again. With a click, the heavy door was opened. But at the same time, the group of keys behind seemed to go crazy, one by one turning into sharp blades and bursting towards the crowd. Protect them all. Irina flicked her wand, and an invisible barrier stood in front of everyone, protecting them from passing through the door. In this way, the four of them successfully entered the second room. When they came to this room, they found themselves on the edge of a huge chessboard, with black chess pieces in front, but each of these chess pieces was as tall as the knight armor of the castle. There were some white chess pieces at the other end of the room, and Harry and Ron shuddered at the horror of these chess pieces. Could it be that we have to act as these pawns, and we can only enter the next room after victory? Ron looked at the few missing pieces in the chess array, and said so. Harry was a little anxious. But, that villain has already passed through this room. I'm afraid we won't have time to finish this game of chess before that villain gets the Sorcerer's Stone. Oh, Irina sighed and walked forward, then just get rid of these chess pieces blocking the way and go straight into the next room." Hearing this, Hermione walked to Irina's side without hesitation. But Harry and Ron were a little hesitant. Their magic level was not strong, and they were not sure of defeating these tall chess pieces. Thunderbolt explosion. At this time, Hermione took the lead. With a wave of her wand, a beam of light shot out of the air and bombarded the Black Knight not far away. Boom! The explosion sounded, and the Black Knight was instantly blown into rubble all over the ground. After discovering that Irina and her party did not intend to abide by the rules, the chess pieces began to move. I saw 16 black pawns and 16 white pawns quickly charging to the front, with a black knight and 2 white knights on both sides, and behind them there were 2 bishops and 2 castles, black and white. As for the ones at the back, the king and queen in black and white. These chess pieces formed a battle formation, attacking in the direction of Irina and others with a murderous intent. Split into pieces. Irina cast a freezing spell with her left hand, freezing a black pawn, and then cast a cutting spell, beating the black pawn that had been frozen into an ice sculpture into ice shards all over the ground. All petrified. If Irina cast mostly lethal spells, then Hermione's spells were mainly for control. Hermione's understanding of herself was very correct. She understood that with her own magic reserve, these chess pieces would be emptied before she could be killed. Therefore, she planned to do her best to delay the movement of these chess pieces so that Irina would have enough time to shoot them away. As for Harry and Ron at the back, they were harassing the chess pieces, setting fire to them from time to time, and casting spells at the king and queen from time to time, forcing some pawns to retreat and defend. Soon, with the cooperation of the 4 people, these chess pieces turned into fragments all over the ground. "Go!" Harry yelled. They passed this room quickly and came to the 3rd room. There was only one unconscious troll in this room. They did not stay any longer, but pinched their noses and held their breath before entering the next room. When the 4 people came to this room, purple and black flames instantly rose at the entrance and exit of the room, and on a table in front of them, there were 7 strange-shaped potion bottles. Next to these potion bottles, there is a roll of parchment. Irina opened the parchment and read the words on it. "Danger is ahead, safety is behind. There are 2 of us who can help you. Drink them, and 1 will lead you forward. The other sends you back to where you came from. 2 contained nettle wine, 3 are killers, waiting in line. Take your pick, unless you want to stay here forever. We also provide 4 clues to help you choose. First, no matter how cunningly the poison hides. In fact, they all stand to the left of the nettle wine. Second, the contents of the bottles at the left and right ends are different. None of them will work for you if you want to move forward. Third, you will find that the bottles are of different sizes. Death is not hidden among giants and dwarfs. Fourth, second from the left and second from the right. Although they look different, the taste is the same." Quote. Looking at the text inside, Hermione held her chin and said, "Obviously, this is a riddle." Irina said bluntly, "The smallest bottle contains the magic potion that can pass through the black flames, and the bottle on the far right contains the magic potion that can go back." Hermione looked at Irina in surprise. As expected of her good best friend, she is amazing. Harry picked up the smallest bottle of potion and frowned. The potion in it is only enough for 1 person to drink, less than 1 sip. Irina spread her hands and said, "It seems that we have someone to go back. But that's okay, we also need someone to go back and inform the professor for support." "That makes sense," Ron nodded. "I'll go to the Owl Hut and write to Professor Dumbledore, maybe he can rescue us in time." Hermione also agreed, and she said, "Then I'll call Professor McGonagall." But at this moment, Harry picked up the potion on the far right and frowned again. "But, there are only 2 people left in this bottle of potion, which means 1 person must be left in this room." Hearing this, everyone fell into silence. Irina said suddenly, "Harry, can you show me the potion that passes through the black flame?" Here, Harry handed the smallest potion bottle to Irina without hesitation. Fireproof potion. Irina approached the bottle mouth, sniffed the smell inside, and judged. "Hey," Irina said softly, putting her left hand into her pocket, "I remember I still have stock." After speaking, Irina took out a small bottle from her pocket. After opening the bottle, the smell inside was exactly the same as that bottle of fire retardant. "Irina, isn't your potions class bad?" Harry was a little shocked. Irina rolled her eyes at him and said, please, even if I'm partial and not good at potions, it's still easy to get an E in the final exam. Harry fell silent for a moment. After checking the potion in her hand, Irina felt a little regretful. Unfortunately, my fireproof potion is only enough for 2 people, which means one of us has to go back and notify the professor. After hearing this, Ron hesitated and volunteered, I'll go. I know that my magic level is the worst among the 4 of us, so I won't hold you back. Ron picked up the potion on the far right. Irina nodded towards him and encouraged, believe in yourself, Ron. In fact, informing the professor is the most important task among us. After all, it is related to whether we can go back alive. Ron nodded vigorously, took the potion, and left through the purple flame. And Irina, Hermione, and Harry took the fire retardant potion and walked through the black flames at the exit. Passing through the black flames, the 3 came to the final room. As soon as he came in, Harry saw Quirrell in front of the mirror of Arise. How is it possible? Is it really you? I thought. Harry was incredible. He has always suspected Professor Snape, but after Professor Snape ruled out the suspicion, he has been unwilling to believe that Quirrell is the culprit. But unexpectedly, what Irina said turned out to be true. Use that boy. Use that boy. At this time, a voice came from the back of Quirrell's head, which made people feel horrified. Yes, Master. Potter, come up to me. Quirrell waved his wand, and the gravel on the ground turned into countless ropes, bound towards Harry. Expelliarmus. Irina raised her hand and cast a disarming spell, forcing Quirrell to cancel the spell and retreat. Trash. Knock out those 2 guys who are in the way. Voldemort's voice came. Quirrell nodded, he swung his wand quickly, and spells came in the direction of Irina and Hermione. Armor protection. Hermione cast the iron armor charm, trying to block Quirrell's attack. However, Hermione seemed to have underestimated Quirrell's spell skills. After all, Quirrell's usual stumbling in class made it difficult for her to regard him as a master of spells. A spell that faintly broke Hermione's armor and hit Hermione hard. Hermione flew backwards for several meters, hit the stone wall behind and fainted. Gone. Seeing that a teammate was missing from the beginning of the battle, Irina suddenly felt difficult. Hermione was knocked unconscious, and Harry was bound by magic ropes in the next few spells, leaving Irina to fight Quirrell alone. Even Lin and Irina may not be able to defeat Quirrell together, let alone Irina alone. There is no doubt that in just a few rounds, Irina was hit by a disarming spell and the wand in her hand flew out. Although Irina still had the ability to cast spells without a wand, she chose to pretend to be defeated and fell to the ground struggling hard. It's up to you, Harry. Irina pretended that she was in so much pain that she couldn't stand up, but her eyes were fixed on Quirrell. No one knows whether Quirrell will kill her with a last-ditch blow without practicing martial ethics. Even if she wants to act, she has to be prepared. Fortunately, Quirrell's desire for the Philosopher's Stone was greater than killing Irina. He tied Harry with a magic rope and tied him to the Mirror of Arise, forcing Harry to look at the Mirror of Arise. After a while, Harry saw himself holding the Philosopher's Stone in the Mirror of Arise. Then, he felt his pocket sink, and the bright red Philosopher's Stone really fell into his pocket. After realizing that Harry had obtained the Philosopher's Stone, Quirrell untied his turban, revealing Voldemort's strange face. Voldemort also possessed Quirrell again, looking at Harry with a grin, trying to snatch the Sorcerer's Stone from Harry's hand. Boom, 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 but at this critical moment, 3 gunshots were heard in succession. There were 3 more bloody holes in Quirrell's back, and the violent impact forced Quirrell to throw himself forward and fall into the mud. However, the generation of squirrels, how can they defile the proud works of the master? Lin walked slowly from the entrance, looking at everything here with cold eyes. In his left hand, there was smoke coming from the muzzle of a desert eagle that shone faintly. The surrounding black flames parted to both sides at the moment they sensed Lin's arrival, making way for Lin. These black flames looked very high, as if welcoming their new king. Senior Luo. Seeing Lin's arrival, Irina subconsciously exclaimed. Lin waved the wand gently, and the wand that had been knocked away by Irina flew back to Irina's hand under the control of the floating spell. Lin chuckled and said, "Never put your life in the hands of others." After getting the wand again and Lin taking action again, Irina simply stopped acting. She pulled out the wand and stood up. Not far away, Quirrell just remembered, but 3 explosions sounded in succession, and 3 clouds of blood mist erupted from the wound where Quirrell had been hit by a bullet. Under Lin's alchemy, every bullet he fired was enchanted by the alchemy circle. These bullets not only have a stronger impact, but also can produce a second explosion after being shot into the enemy's body. The enemy inflicted heavy damage. Thunderbolt explosion. Lin quickly waved his wand and hit Quirrell with an explosive spell. Voldemort controlled Quirrell to stand up, gritted his teeth and cast the iron armor curse. Aha, 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 The iron armor curse blocked Lin N's explosion curse, but at this time, dozens of alchemy floating cannons around Lin N also attacked one after another, and countless golden light beams made a sound of explosion, suppressing the direction of Qi Luo with the force of thunder. Kill and go. Before coming here, Lin N already had a strategy for fighting Voldemort. Preventing Quirrell from drinking the blood of the unicorn in the Forbidden Forest is one of the links, which can weaken Quirrell's combat power in today's battle, and the MK2 grenade stuffed into the Mirror of Arised as the second link. Even if the injuries caused by the MK2 grenade can be healed by the healing spell, the magic power consumption of the wizard is still huge, which reduces the magic power that Quirrell can mobilize again. And just now Lin N used the Desert Eagle to attack him unprepared, and the 3 shots were the third link of the countermeasures. The Desert Eagle strengthened by alchemy can make Quirrell fall into a state of serious damage. In this case, even if Voldemort manages it himself, it is difficult to exert his true strength. As for Lin N's continuous attacks using the wand in his hand and dozens of alchemical floating cannons around him, this is the last part of the countermeasures. The storm-like offensive can make Quirrell have no time to cast healing spells to recover his injuries, which also means that Quirrell will continue to be in a state of serious injuries, facing Lin and Aaron in their prime in this extremely poor state now. Linked together, Lin's strategy is obviously to completely capture Voldemort. Roll. Voldemort roared angrily, recognizing Lin's identity. Lin N's father betrayed him and was killed by him. He didn't expect that 11 years later, the other party's son would interfere with him like this. The 3 bullets that exploded in the body made Quirrell's organs nearly exhausted. If he didn't treat it in time, this body would soon die completely, but Lin N's offensive made him dare not be distracted at all. The flames are blazing. Lin flicked his wand, and this was the first time he recited the fire spell this year. For a person like Lin who can cast spells silently and without a wand, he no longer needs to recite the spell to cast the fire spell. And once Lin N recited the spell, it meant that he was going all out with this flame spell. The crimson flames burned and enveloped the entire room, burning the sky and boiling the sea. The terrifying high temperature swept towards Quirrell. On the other side, Irina quickly used a cutting spell to break the rope binding Harry, and then joined in the attack on Quirrell. Voldemort roared angrily and controlled Quirrell to cast several defensive spells in succession, only to be able to block the attack of the alchemical floating cannon. Facing Lin's flames, even a strong man like Voldemort could only maintain the iron armor curse with powerful magic power in such a situation. Shattered to pieces, Lin released the curse again, and a beam of light as thick as an arm shot out of the air, shattering Voldemort's armor curse in an instant. At this moment, Lin has completely gained the upper hand. How is it possible? It is impossible for a second-grade wizard to cast such a powerful spell. Voldemort's pupils dilated and he looked at Lin in disbelief. Lin let go of his left hand, and the luster of a magic crystal that had exhausted its magic power dimmed. Yes, it is true that I cannot cast such a powerful crushing spell, but I borrowed the power of foreign objects. Lin chuckled lightly, and while dodging Voldemort's curses, he continued to issue more powerful curses to suppress Voldemort. On the side, after rescuing Harry, Irina also began to cast the freezing spell to restrict Voldemort's movement. The water is as clear as a spring. Irina chanted the spell softly, and endless water flowed from the top of the wand, but under Irina's control, it turned into ice cones all over the sky. These ice cones shone with sharp light and shot towards Quirrell one after another. Faced with such a desperate situation, Voldemort had no choice but to raise his hand and summon a ball of fierce fire just like he did in the Forbidden Forest last time. There is no time to delay, let me destroy them all. Voldemort roared. Fierce fire turned into various animal forms under his control, galloping towards Lin and Irina to devour them. Forbidden fire. Seeing this, Lin En released the forbidden fire without hesitation, and a large number of forbidden fire went up under Lin En's control, once again forming a rivalry with fierce fire. However, in the face of fiend fire, a black magic capable of devouring everything, the forbidden fire is only a delay. Give me the Philosopher's Stone, Harry. Lin cast his eyes on Harry, who stood up, and shouted in a low voice. If the Philosopher's Stone can be obtained, then Lin can use the alchemy device in his left hand to absorb the huge magic power inside the Philosopher's Stone for his own use. If there is a Sorcerer's Stone as an energy supply, Lin En is absolutely sure to cast the curse that can extinguish these fiendish flames. Hearing Lin's words, Harry showed vigilant eyes, and his hand covering the Philosopher's Stone tightened. In Harry's view, Lin might be like Voldemort, a villain who wants to get the Philosopher's Stone for his own sake. After all, the other party is Slytherin. If he handed the Sorcerer's Stone to this person named Roar, I'm afraid the other person would immediately leave with the Sorcerer's Stone. Then wouldn't he and Irina have to face Voldemort alone? Absolutely not to hand it over. Harry thought so and took 2 steps back. Give it to him, Harry. However, Irina also shouted towards Harry. From what Lin En said when he arrived, the attentive Irina caught the keyword, Master's proud work. Coupled with Lin En's identity as an alchemist, it was obvious that the other party and that Nico Flamel must be closely connected. No, if he is like Voldemort, then all our efforts will be in vain. Harry shouted. Hearing this, Irina was suddenly a little anxious. She was about to be made to cry by this stupid son. Lin is obviously one of his own, can't Harry even tell the difference? But at this moment, Lin continued to attack Quirrell with the alchemical floating cannon around him, and he waved his wand and used a powerful floating spell to lift Harry up by his tie, and lifted Harry up. He was forcefully dragged in front of him. You really have no self-awareness. Lin sneered, stretched out his left hand, and pointed at Harry's pocket where the Philosopher's Stone was hidden. Harry screamed, trying to stop him. But how could he be so thin to stop Lin? Lin knocked off Harry's blocking right hand, and found the Sorcerer's Stone as bright as blood from Harry's pocket. What a wonderful work! Lin En pointed the Philosopher's Stone in his hand at the flame not far away, and the blood-red light immediately enveloped his face, and he seemed a little intoxicated and said. But soon, Lin's left hand held the Philosopher's Stone. Buzz! The explosion of magic power sounded, and the alchemy equipment in Lin's left hand turned into a bridge between the magic stone and Lin's body, allowing Lin to use the huge magic power contained in the magic stone unimpeded. However, the huge flow of magic power in a short period of time caused this pair of alchemy gloves to almost reach its upper limit. Just like excessive current passing through a circuit in a short period of time will cause a short circuit, this pair of alchemy gloves has begun to get hot. But Lin's movements did not stop. He stopped his wand towards the ground. All curses end. Huge magic suddenly swept through the entire room. Whether it was the flame curse that Lin En had released previously, the golden beam from the alchemical floating cannon around Lin En, or the fire curse that Voldemort had cast, they all dissipated like smoke in an instant. Even the black flames at the entrance of the room dissipated under the influence of the curse. In the room at this moment, only Lin's forbidden fire was left, and this half-magic, half-alchemy product could survive. Expelliarmus! Lin's wand pointed at Quirrell, and a thick red beam shot out. The diameter of this terrifying beam was close to 1 meter. What is the concept of a beam with a diameter of 1 meter? This is already equivalent to the rays emitted by a giant laser cannon. With the support of the huge magical power provided by the Sorcerer's Stone, Lin actually released a disarming spell that was unheard of in the entire wizarding world. However, after releasing this magic spell, some sparks erupted from the top of Lin's wand. It was obvious that such a huge flow of magic power had reached the upper limit of the wand. Lin suddenly touched his wand with some distress. He didn't dare to let the wand continue to use such magic. If the wand was destroyed, it would be more of a loss than the gain. After all, he could bet there wasn't a wand in the world that suited him better than this one. Not even the Elder Wand. Perhaps the Elder Wand is stronger than this wand, but its affinity for Lin's flame is definitely not as strong as this mahogany wand grafted with sycamore wood. On the other hand, even Voldemort, who has his own body, may not be able to block such a level of disarming curse, let alone Voldemort who occupies Quirrell's already seriously injured body. The terrifying red light beam immediately knocked Quirrell tens of meters away, and hit hard on the stone wall at the end of the room. And Quirrell's wand no longer needs to be disarmed. The terrifying light beam directly turned this wand into dust. Shattered to pieces. Not far away, seeing that Quirrell still wanted to move, Irina chanted a spell to make up the knife without hesitation. Knowing the importance of making up the knife, she hit Quirrell's heart with a shattering curse, and shattered Quirrell's heart. At this point, Voldemort's temporary carrier is officially declared dead. Facing Quirrell who died, Lynn and Irina did not let down their vigilance unanimously. Under the two men's close gaze, a strange black mist suddenly rose from Quirrell's body, and this black mist transformed into Voldemort's ugly face. When he saw Voldemort turned into black mist, the scar on Harry's forehead suddenly burned like a flame, causing Harry to faint from pain. The great Voldemort will return to the world one day, and you will all become the dead souls under the great Voldemort's wand. Voldemort roared and tried to escape by controlling the black mist transformed by the remaining soul. But just as the black mist was about to leave through the entrance, a ball of forbidden demon fire with black lines rose up. Then you have to be able to walk. You're a two-hole socket without a nose. Lynn said with a sneer. With a slight flick of his wand, all the forbidden magic fire he had refined earlier was released, covering the entire room. Hearing Lin N's words, Irina, who was not far away, suddenly showed a look of admiration. As expected of Senior Luoer, he even said what she wanted to say for her. As for Harry, he was a little shocked. He didn't expect Lin to ridicule Voldemort like this. Even if Voldemort was a remnant, he would still go crazy, right? Sure enough, after hearing Lin's taunt, Voldemort became extremely angry. However, after sensing the forbidden fire around him that could seal away magic, Voldemort fell silent. This power of banning magic is not only aimed at magic, but all products of magic. The reason why Voldemort was able to maintain this freely moving remnant soul form must have relied on the effect of magic, which also made the black mist transformed by Voldemort's remnant soul at this time suppressed by the flame of the forbidden demon. Flames. The power to seal magic, how can such a thing exist? Voldemort seemed a little frightened. He looked at the forbidden demon flames that were compressing around him, and he actually showed fear. He could sense the great threat this forbidden fire posed to him, and the fear of death made Voldemort lose his temper again. At this time, Irina was also a little unbelievable. Although Lin's forbidden flame recognized her as a friend and did not suppress her magic power, Voldemort's words made her understand the efficacy of Lin's flame. Can magic be suppressed? No wonder even Voldemort is afraid of it. Stay. Lin waved his hands, and the flames covering the entire room swept towards Voldemort with lightning speed. However, Voldemort was once a devil-level wizard after all. Even if he lost his body, he must not be ignored. Although Voldemort was somewhat reluctant to part with the little remnant of his soul, he who dared to even split 7 Horcruxes knew how to cut them off when necessary to minimize the loss. I saw Voldemort separating 2/3 of the black mist, turning it into a terrifying sharp blade and slashing towards Lin N's forbidden fire, while the remaining 1/3 of the remaining souls took the opportunity to head towards. He rushed towards the only exit of the room. The black sharp blade briefly opened a gap in Lin's forbidden fire, but the gap healed in less than half a breath. But it was this half-breath time that allowed Voldemort's remaining remnant soul to escape. Looking at the direction in which Voldemort escaped, Lin N's expression was a little gloomy. Although he was mentally prepared that he could not completely leave this remnant soul behind, he did not expect that the other party would leave so easily. However, being able to weaken 2/3 of Voldemort's remnant soul is also a great thing for Lin. In this way, even if Voldemort can be resurrected in the future, his magical power will drop to the level of the devil, and he will not return to his original strength. Lin withdrew his forbidden demonic fire with some regret. But at this moment, another bright flame rose. Who? Lin N looked wary. This flame was not released by him. However, Lin and Irina immediately lowered their guard after seeing the figure appearing in the flames. Professor Dumbledore. Lin and Irina saluted at the same time. I saw a phoenix sitting on Professor Dumbledore's shoulder, and Professor Dumbledore looked at the two of them with a slight smile. If I'm not mistaken, it was you who protected the Sorcerer's Stone from Quirrell, or Voldemort, right? Professor Dumbledore waved his wand gently, and Quirrell's body disappeared. The mirror of Arise turned into a small mirror under the powerful shrinking spell and was put away by Professor Dumbledore. Lynn nodded slightly and said, "Yes, unfortunately our magic level is not enough, Voldemort still escaped." "Don't belittle yourself, child." Professor Dumbledore came to Lynn and patted Lynn on the shoulder. "I'm afraid even I can't do it if I can keep 2/3 of Voldemort's soul." Lynn was not surprised by Professor Dumbledore's words. He looked at Dumbledore calmly. "It seems that you have been here to watch a long time ago." Professor Dumbledore smiled and shook his head and said, "No, I had just arrived when Quirrell died." Lynn wouldn't believe his lies, but he still nodded with apparent conviction. At this time, Professor Dumbledore turned his attention to Irina. "Miss Lowell, you did a good job and were able to protect your companions from Voldemort. You also deserve praise." Irina leaned forward slightly. "Thank you, Professor, for the compliment." Irina also didn't believe Dumbledore's statement that she had just arrived. In her opinion, when she came to this room, the other party was already here watching. "Very well," said Dumbledore, "take your friends and return to the castle together. Hold my hand." Lynn didn't hesitate and put his right hand on Dumbledore's shoulder. Irina first carried the unconscious Hermione behind her, then dragged Harry up with one hand, and finally stretched out her other hand to grab Dumbledore's left hand. Dumbledore smiled and blinked, the phoenix fox chirped, and a flame swept up. The next moment, everyone returned to Hogwarts Castle. "And Ron has been waiting here for a long time." Seeing Harry and Hermione unconscious, Ron exclaimed and quickly tried to wake them up, but was stopped by Dumbledore. "Miss Lowell, Mr. Weasley, I think you should send your friends to the school hospital now, don't you?" Dumbledore's blue eyes behind his half-moon glasses blinked and said to Irina and Ron. Hearing this, Irina and Ron looked at each other. Irina picked up Hermione, while Ron carried Harry on his back, and the two headed towards the school hospital. "Mr. Roll, let's talk." Looking at the direction where Irina and others left, Dumbledore smiled, then looked at Lynn and asked. Lynn didn't know what the other party was planning, but he still nodded and said, "Okay." So, Lynn followed Dumbledore outside the principal's office in the tower. Cockroach Pile. The headmaster's office was guarded by a huge stone beast, which gave way after hearing Dumbledore say the correct password. Behind the stone beast is an automatic spiral staircase. At the top of the staircase is the door to the office. It is a shiny oak door with a brass door knocker in the shape of a griffin's head. After entering the principal's office, Lynn could see that the walls of this spacious and beautiful circular room were covered with portraits of past principals. The principals in these portraits usually dozed in their respective frames, and occasionally went to other places. Lynn could still see the sorting hat on Dumbledore's desk. After arriving at the office, Phoenix chirped happily and flew to the shelf where it belonged. "What would you like to drink, coffee or black tea?" Professor Dumbledore sat down and looked at Lynn with a smile. Lynn said softly, "Let's have black tea." After getting Dumbledore's permission, Lynn also sat down, facing Dumbledore. Dumbledore waved his wand, and a teapot flew up automatically, pouring steaming black tea into the teacup, and the teacup filled with black tea floated up and came to Lynn. Lynn picked up the black tea and took a sip. Then he remembered something and took out a blood-red stone from his pocket. "Professor, your magic stone." Lynn placed the Philosopher's Stone on the table in front of Dumbledore and said so. Although the powerful power brought to him by the magic stone is somewhat unforgettable, he understands that the power brought by the magic stone is only temporary after all. If his own strength cannot keep up, then the long-term exertion will be far beyond what his body can bear. The magic power of his ability, I'm afraid that scrapped alchemy glove will be his fate. Seeing that Lynn was not greedy for this power, Dumbledore couldn't help but smile sincerely. However, what surprised Lynn was that Dumbledore did not reach out to take the Sorcerer's Stone. Instead, he pushed the Sorcerer's Stone back in front of Lynn. "Professor, what are you doing?" Lynn looked at Professor Dumbledore with some confusion, not understanding what this meant. If Dumbledore wanted to test himself, then by taking the initiative to hand over the Sorcerer's Stone just now, he had already passed the test, right? But what did Dumbledore mean by pushing the Sorcerer's Stone back? Looking at Lynn's doubtful eyes, Dumbledore's blue eyes flashed and said, "I think this magic stone belongs to you." Hearing this, Lynn was suddenly a little surprised. According to the plot in the original book, the Philosopher's Stone will be destroyed by Dumbledore after it completes its task of leading out Voldemort. But what does Dumbledore mean now when he says that the Philosopher's Stone belongs to him? Before Lynn could ask, Dumbledore explained softly, "Originally, Nico planned to let me destroy the magic stone after I finished using it, because Nico and his wife have lived for more than 600 years and have nothing to do with this world. Too much nostalgia to be able to face the great adventure of death calmly." Lynn nodded slightly. What Dumbledore said was no different from what he understood. Just listen to Dumbledore continue. "However, last summer, Nico asked Wallison to tell me that after this incident, he hoped that I could give you the Sorcerer's Stone for him as a gift from the elders." Quote. At this time, Dumbledore recalled the conversation Green came to the office with during the summer vacation last year. "Mr. Dumbledore, my teacher hopes that you can transfer the Philosopher's Stone to Lynn for him after this year's events are over, in the name of a gift from an elder," Green said to Dumbledore calmly. Dumbledore was a little surprised and asked, "Is this what Nico meant? But didn't he agree to destroy the Sorcerer's Stone before?" Green nodded slightly and said, "But teacher, he met Lynn, you know, the first-year Slytherin child, my student. He believes that the Sorcerer's Stone itself is not sinful, and he also hopes to witness it. The growth of this kid, Lynn, eh? Besides, I think Lynn needs the Philosopher's Stone as a beacon on his alchemy path." I guess you need it, don't you?" Dumbledore said with a smile as his thoughts were racing. Lin En was silent. He did not expect that his master would choose to hand over the magic stone to him. Yes, as his teacher said, he needs this magic stone. With enough magic power, many things that he could not do can be solved perfectly. According to Lin En's own magic growth rate, he will have to wait until his 4th grade to learn to refine the alchemy circle without the carving knife, and wait until his 5th grade to condense the alchemy circle in the void. Like Green did last Halloween. But with the magic stone as an energy source, Lin can now learn these profound alchemical techniques. At this time, some people may be wondering, aren't the alchemy gloves refined by Lin En and Lin En's own body unable to carry the huge magic power of the magic stone? Even spells cannot be cast continuously, let alone alchemy, which requires a lot of time and energy. You must know that Lin En can control the rate at which he draws magic power from the Sorcerer's Stone. The reason why he reached the upper limit of the capacity in the previous battle was because Lin En did not dare to face a former devil-level wizard like Voldemort. A big one. Only by going all out to fight against Voldemort could Lin have a chance to defeat him, and this made Lin desperate to obtain the magic power of the Philosopher's Stone. This is true for fighting with one's life, but it is not necessary for daily alchemy. Lin can simply obtain the magic power he needs, which is beneficial to Lin. Lin En understood this. He reached out and picked up the magic stone and put it away again. But, Professor, I still can't figure it out. Lin looked directly at Professor Dumbledore. Professor Dumbledore gestured. You say it. Lin said bluntly. I think, Professor, you should understand my origin. My father was a Death Eater. Professor, can you really rest assured that a descendant of a Death Eater can obtain such a precious thing as the Philosopher's Stone? Something. What if all this is just a play directed and performed by Voldemort and I? After hearing Lin's words, Dumbledore laughed out loud. Dumbledore smiled, almost to tears. After a while, Dumbledore stopped smiling. Dumbledore looked at Lin and said seriously, You know, Lin, I never doubted you. Because, your father was never a Death Eater. Lin was a little surprised. His father was not a Death Eater. How is that possible? Lin En believed that everyone would deceive him, but his mother would not. The fact that his father was a Death Eater could be said to be a certainty. Even the Death Eater camp in the Daily Prophet more than 10 years ago, his father's figure has appeared in every place. But now, Dumbledore said that his father was not a Death Eater, which made Lin feel extremely puzzled. Perhaps you have ever wondered who set up the loyalty charm at Roll Manor, and who is the secret keeper? Dumbledore said. Lin nodded secretly. He was not surprised that Dumbledore knew about his family's situation, and what Dumbledore said was indeed what he had doubted. But actually, Lin, I'm the secret keeper. Dumbledore's understatement set off a storm in Lin's heart. Dumbledore looked at Lin sincerely, and continued, The reason why I say your father is not a Death Eater is because your father has never truly surrendered to Voldemort. He is the society I founded to fight against Voldemort. AA people from the Order of the Phoenix. Hearing this, a possibility flashed in Lin's mind, and he felt that this idea was really crazy. However, Dumbledore seemed to see what Lin was thinking. He nodded and said, "Yes, your father, Henry Roll, was an undercover agent arranged by the Order of the Phoenix to eat the Death Apostles. He was fighting against Voldemort. In those days, your father Henry provided the Order of the Phoenix with a lot of information, which allowed us to successfully stop Voldemort's many actions and save many of our friends from death. It turns out that Henry Roll is from the Order of the Phoenix." Recalling what happened before, Lin felt that everything made sense. Yes, judging from the Weasley family's hatred for Voldemort and the Death Eaters, it is impossible for Mrs. Weasley to be so friendly to him, the son of the Death Eaters, even with the twin Weasleys as friends. After all, even Mrs. Weasley, her daughter-in-law, Fleur, didn't have a good look on her face, and this was just because of her status as a mixed Vela. If his father is actually a member of the Order of the Phoenix and a former comrade of the Weasleys, then Mrs. Weasley cares about him so much that she even sewed a dress for him at Christmas. It makes sense. Then my father's death was because his identity as an undercover agent was exposed? Lin asked. Dumbledore shook his head. "I don't know, we only received this letter before Henry was killed by Voldemort." With that said, Dumbledore handed a piece of completely yellowed parchment to Lin. Lin looked at the envelope, and there was only one sentence written on it. "Regulus Black found me and wanted to take me to a place where weapons capable of defeating Voldemort are stored." Seeing this sentence, Lin understood. It seemed that his father and Regulus Black went to the cave where Voldemort stored the Horcruxes and took away the Horcruxes. Regulus died, and his father left with the Horcrux. However, his father's abnormality was discovered by Voldemort, which led to his father's death. But where is the taken-away Horcrux? Still being stored at Blake's ancestral home. Lin was a little confused. "So, your father Henry was never a sinner, but a great hero, a hero who stood in the darkness. And you, Lin, Henry's only child, naturally will not be either what a descendant of a Death Eater, remember, you are a descendant of a hero." Dumbledore's half-moon glasses flashed, and he said to Lin very seriously, "If the army of Death Eaters led by Voldemort is the darkness in the wizarding world, then Henry Roll who is in the darkness is a crack in that darkness. However, there are cracks in everything and where the light gets in. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more."